But it's too late now. I remember you and me, and how careless we could be.
All day and all night, we'd stay up, it felt so right. We were so young, we were so dumb. We would get drunk and then hook up. We were okay, we were alright, staying awake till the sunrise. We were in love, couldn't stop us, like a good drug, never enough. We hook up in my car, driving so far, play your guitar, you'd show me your art. Let down our guards, think with our hearts, stare at the stars, we were never apart. Drinking too young, way too much fun, out in the sun, orbit when it's gone. Took you to prom, dance to our song, dance all night long till the lights come on. Late now, I remember everything, and how careless we could be, and how careless we could be, and how careless we could be.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the DT show. Kind of playing around there with the intro music and stuff. Didn't really think that Coburger was the right intro. I got to come up with something new now that we're talking about a couple of new cases. Didn't really think the Karen Reed one was the right one. That one probably wasn't the right one either. But welcome to the show. Welcome, guys. Sorry I didn't go live yesterday. Had a lot of things going on. And to be honest, I was also kind of going through some of these documents that have been dropped. Or released to me at least, and trying to get some better copies of it. But there's been some documents that, or at least another article that was dropped here recently referencing Jack and Lilly Sullivan's disappearance that happened back in May of this year. And it kind of goes over some of the stuff that's in there. We'll look at some of the documents. I'll kind of show you guys what I'm talking about as far as what I had to decipher, so to speak. But I got through some of it, and I got some opinions and thoughts. I've talked to quite a few people now, ever since I started talking about this case, which I'm fairly new still, I'm fairly roughly barely getting into all the, the bits and pieces here, so to speak, about the case. And so I'm still working my way through it, still navigating my way through it. But what I've come across is a lot of great people who've reached out to me who are from the area of Nova Scotia. And some people are highly close to this, such as Daniel Martell and Janie McKenzie. I've been in conversation with them. Some folks that live in the area and some folks that live just outside of the area. Some folks who have reached out to people close to this case, and so many in between. So I've talked to probably 8 people close to this case in some form or fashion. And I've kind of gotten a little bit of an understanding of the area, the scenario, what happened, in that moment, and what some of the family members have gone to try to attest that they are not implicated in this. And, so far, law enforcement has come out kind of indicating that they haven't found anything criminal, or it kind of leads to me to believe that they sort of, think that the kids seem to wandered off. And so the documents kind of indicate that. And so does this new article that was dropped. And so hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, ring that notification bell. You guys know what to do. Now, before we start, I do want to say that first and foremost, my mind is not 100% made up in this case. I've only looked at it. I think we've done 4 shows. I've looked at it a few, probably more days than I can admit, or want to admit that I've looked into it and talked to some folks for a few hours now. But I'm still fairly new. My mind is not made up in this case. And there's not a hill that I'm willing to die on, whether that's the parents did something or the parents didn't do something. Like if tomorrow one of the parents got arrested for something related to this case, I would be surprised, but I wouldn't be shocked, you know? And I would assume that law enforcement had more evidence out there that they were letting on. I don't necessarily believe that's to be the case, but let's break it down. Let's look at it. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. You guys know what to do. So this is the document. Now I'm only going to go through some of it because it's a screen recording of all of it, and it's hard to decipher, guys. I'll be honest with you. Some of it's hard to read. It's a lot easier to read off of my phone, and I've read most of it through my phone. But we'll look at it from here, and what we can read, we'll discuss, and what we can't, obviously, I'll go to the article for. And this is actually really slowed down too. This thing was sent to me. It's 18 minutes and 53 seconds long. You know, when I put them together, it was only like 5 or 6 minutes. So I've had to slow this down tremendously so that I can see it. Now, one of the biggest problems with this is that it was sent to me via Facebook Messenger. And when you send things through Messenger, the quality isn't usually the same as maybe perhaps if it was emailed to me. And so for the person that sent it to me, if you don't mind, I've been trying to get a hold of you. If you can email me the same screen recordings, I 100% am confident that it'll look a lot better than what this is. This is me manipulating it a little bit, cleaning it up as much as I possibly can, and you know, enhancing it. But here we go. And so, like I said, it's the first part talks about some of the warrants that they had. I mean, this one says right here, Text Plus Inc. shared produced documents for data listed above. And it's all about certain warrants for certain things is the beginning portion of this. And then it really doesn't get into like the, you know, what happened there for a little bit. And as you can see, when they move a little fast, it's hard to read what some of this is saying. This is more of the kind of the warrants that they got. You see, this one's I successfully completed an RCMP search warrant drafting course. In fact, McMurray in March 2015. And some of this is also like some of the officers' things. All right, here it goes. It says here on May 2nd, 2025, 6-year-old Lilly Sullivan and 4-year-old Jack Sullivan were reported missing from their house at 1407 Gairloch Road in Lansdowne, NS. Lilly was asleep by her mother, was last seen by her mother, Malaya, and stepfather, Daniel, that morning sometime, and then it's redacted. And it goes on to say, when she came into their bedroom, Jack had not been seen since the night before, but Malaya and Daniel had heard them playing in the house that morning during the that something time frame. And it goes on to say an extensive search. It went too far for me. I was supposed to pause. But an extensive search has gone down, and they couldn't find anybody. And he also talks about talking to the mom. And one of the things that I realized is when he talks about things that are redacted, I noticed that it seems like these are things, in my opinion, that are unfounded, meaning that they were reported, but they don't know for a fact as fact. And these documents were released. And so because those documents were released, I think that they understand that the media was going to get a hold of them. And so if there wasn't something that it was unfounded, now to me, unfounded doesn't necessarily mean that they're not true or it wasn't real or fact is that there was no evidence to prove whatever it is that they were saying. And one of the things is that I believe that is redacted through this, because there's much of it that is, and it sounds like it's coming from when Daniel goes out there and talks to law enforcement, and he has kind of felt that Malaya has done something with the children, not necessarily nefarious, just that he believes that 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 for whatever reason Malaya had the kids taken, and came up with this elaborate hoax or plan. Maybe not hoax is the right word, but this plan to have the children taken somewhere else. And she knows where they're at. She knows they're okay. But that because of the way she acted, the way she reacted that morning, there's a lot of things that in his opinion, in his mind, don't set right. And you know, I've come to talk to a few people from the area, and they kind of feel the same way, that there's you know, that Malaya didn't act appropriately. But according to the documents and according to other reports per the documents, Malaya talked with law enforcement on 5 separate occasions about things. And, you know, she may not have been coming forward to the media and things of that nature, but she was moving forward with who it mattered, because she don't owe anything to the media. She don't owe anything to you or I or any of these other creators that come out here and talk on YouTube. None of them do, to be honest with us, you know, with everybody. I say us because I'm part of it. You know, to be honest with us or with you and me, it does not, you know, they don't owe us those things, but they've what they do owe is to go forward with those that can do something about it, which is law enforcement. They can do the search and rescue. They can do all these other things. And so she's cooperated with law enforcement. So is Daniel, so is Janie. And so is what appears to be everybody that has had, you know, any real, what's the word I'm looking for? Involvement in the kids' lives, including their biological father, who was polygraphed, I believe, twice. And so everybody has cooperated, and has come forward. Now, I agree that just because there's a better way of doing something doesn't necessarily mean that something, you know, that they didn't do something. Like I've said it before, like, because like in the Brian Koberger case, people ask about all the mistakes that he made and wouldn't it have been easier or better for him to have done this or that. And I say, just because there's a better way of doing something doesn't necessarily mean that this person didn't think of that, or this person had the ability to think of those things and came up with those same solutions. And so, but in this scenario, we got to look at this in 2 directions. These kids, and according to the documents, they believe they wandered off. Law enforcement is kind of what they believe, that they wandered off. And now, for Daniel, Malaya, and Janie, it would be in their best interest for them to make law enforcement continue to believe that they wandered off. Not that each other is part of some sort of elaborate hoax, not that each other is part of some sort of game, not that each other is part of some sort of, or that something nefarious happened to the kids and that they were abducted by somebody else, a third party, so to speak. Because those are 2 very different investigations. For one, an investigation for kids wandering off into the woods is really 100% different than an investigation of somebody searching for something that happened nefarious. Now, I'm not saying that they're not going to go and do those investigations. They sure as well are. But for, you know, Malaya and Daniel to continue to come up with these thoughts and theories that something else may have occurred and that they weren't out in the woods, it is an indication for law enforcement to continue to investigate into things that could uncover some actions that they have done, because they are looking into those things. I hope it makes sense what I'm trying to say. But those are 2 separate investigations. A missing person that wandered into the woods. You're getting search, rescue. You're going to ask some questions, but for the most part, that's where you're going to focus that investigation. A possible abduction, you're doing geofencing. You're looking for cell phones. You're you're pulling cameras from further away to see who's in the area. You're doing a lot of things, which, by the way, it seems like law enforcement did all those things in this case. So they were investigating this as if it was more than just two kids wandering off into the woods. They crossed their T's and dotted their I's, so to speak, when it came to this investigation. Now, I'm just going to pull this off because it really doesn't make any sense for me to try to read all that. And we'll go through here step by step. And then here in a little bit, I'm going to give you guys what my theory could be on what happened, what most likely happened, and then the slight possibility of what could have happened involving somebody else. And we'll work that out here in a second. But this is this is from the Chronicle Herald. This was just dropped, I believe, on the 29th. So that's today, updated 11 hours ago. And so this says here, warrants in Jack and Lilly Sullivan case raise questions but have few answers. If there are clues for finding Lilly and Jack Sullivan in the warrants, they are redacted. And like I said, the redacted stuff kind of to me seemed like it was things that they weren't able to maybe prove one way or another, or maybe perhaps there was a disagreement. Like that one part in that sentence where it talks about Lilly going into the bedroom and Daniel seeing Lilly in the bedroom. There's a part of that sentence that's redacted. I don't know why it's redacted, but maybe perhaps Malaya doesn't remember seeing Lilly coming into the bedroom, and maybe that's why it's redacted, because one said one thing and one said another. I don't know. It's possible. I couldn't tell you, though. All right. So this goes on to say the documents were used for police to get warrants were unsealed last week in response to a legal challenge of the Canadian Press, the Globe, Mail, and Mail, and CBC. While heavily edited, they show an exhaustive efforts, which included polygraph tests of the children's immediate family. They all passed. Checking of bank information and electronic communications, search history and GPS coordinates of cell phones, pump of the of area septic tanks, and searching of contents, collecting a video of private cameras within an 8 kilometer radius, along with businesses, schools, buses travel in the area that morning, and the quote quid pass toll booth, following up on 670 tips, etc. Right? There's more to it, but those efforts are redacted out of concern that they would interfere with the investigation and in some ways violate privacy of those involved. And I think also it's kind of like that third party motive. Like you kind of have to have some sort of evidence to believe, like if, for instance, and this is the kind of the way it came up to me when I was talking to Daniel about this, because he thinks that it was redacted what he said about his suspicions about Malaya, that she didn't, panic or she wasn't worried. She left, some other things. And I'm not getting into it because I honestly don't remember. I got to go back and look at the things that we said. I don't want to misquote him. And so he had his doubts about, he thought maybe perhaps there was an opportunity that she had somebody pick up the kids and they left, and that they were using this as some sort of excuse to get out of there. I don't know. It don't make sense to me. And I've told him that. I was like, it doesn't make sense to me. She had full custody of the kids. For those that think that maybe perhaps the reserve has her, or the reservation has her, I'm sorry. I doubt it, because if it was a part of the government there, like child custody or CPS for the reservation, let's just say that Malaya wanted to voluntarily hand over the kids to them for whatever reason. She's the sole custody of the children. There's no, the father, the biological father, signed over his rights. If you're that government entity, that CPS entity, you're not going to go through this elaborate deal to get these kids away when you could just say, all right, well, you sign them away. I mean, it's not signing your rights away, but give us permission, do this. There's such an easier way of doing it in that scenario without going through this whole fake abduction stuff. So I don't buy Malaya had somebody pick up the kids. I really don't. I think that's probably the least plausible thing from everything, that she had somebody pick up the kids and now they're hidden somewhere on a reservation. Just, I don't buy that one. Not very much. I think that's the least likely of the scenarios that I've come across. Goes on to say, at this point in the investigation, Jack and Lilly disappearance is not believed to be criminal in nature. I do not have reasonable grounds to believe a criminal offense has occurred, but Jack and Lilly are still missing. And those are quoted things by law enforcement in this investigation. And so it goes back to what it is that everything that they have done. These guys have fully cooperated. And you got to realize, Daniel, Janie, Malaya, fully cooperative. I know a lot of people go, hey, you know, do more. I'm not sure what more they can do. They've taken the lie detector test. It'd be one thing if they were uncooperative, right? They haven't taken a lie detector test, or they weren't allowing law enforcement to search their property, or whatever the case may be. And, you know, if those things still hadn't happened, I'd be 100% right with you. Yeah, boom, let's go. But what more can they do at this point? They've done the lie detector test, which, from what I understand, there were two separate officers, and it was two separate scenarios, and the questions were different as well. According to the articles about the documents, they asked mainly, and this is from Daniel as well, all the questions were mainly about the death of the children. Was there something that caused their death? Now, why would they be asking and focusing on those questions? Now, if we look at all the information and the evidence that they've collected, they probably ruled out everything else. They don't believe that he sold them to somebody else. They probably don't believe that he was involved in an abduction. They don't believe in all these other scenarios, and that the only two that probably exist at that point are either the kids wandered off, and maybe perhaps while they wandered off, somebody else took them, or he had something nefarious to do with the kids. Now, according to the article that I read, I think it was the CBC, they mentioned that Malaya's questionings were more around the disappearance and the death of the children. And so when you have, for instance, and I agree, there's some suspicious stuff here, but when you have Daniel saying some things about Malaya that, you know, she acted a certain way, you know, she took off. There's a few things, I guess, that kind of stick out, and law enforcement is going to investigate that. If they have the opportunity to question her, of course they're going to question her about those things. And you also have to factor in who else that they talk to. You know, they talk to her parents. Now, her parents, they probably can tell that they weren't there at that time based off of phone records, right? And so they know that they were a bit of a ways away, and you know, they probably are going to surround their questions a lot different than the questions that they would have surrounded Daniel with. Because if they were involved in this, it would be either covering up for Malaya or helping Malaya, you know, abduct the kids, as Daniel was saying. And so you have all these people taking lie detector tests. They're not going to be answering the exact same questions. They're going to be tailor made towards what they suspect is plausible that they could have had done or been a part of in the crime. You get what I'm saying? It's not, if you have like a different scenario where you have a bank situation, somebody steals some money from a bank, and you have this one guy, but you know he was somewhere else. You know, you're going to ask him questions about knowledge and things of that nature, not about actually being there, because that's a bad scenario. I shouldn't have said that. That's a bad, my mistake. But basically, you're going to tailor make what you have and what's plausible with the people that you have to find the truth. That's basically what I'm trying to say. All right, let's continue this. But this figure right here says, and this is after they have gotten all of the evidence against them, and they've continued to cooperate. So in order for Daniel, Janie, or Malaya to have done something nefarious, or even if it wasn't nefarious, they would have done an accident would have occurred, and they're trying to cover that up. They had 19 hours and 15 minutes from 2:45 to 10 a.m. when they called law enforcement to have committed the perfect crime, in some sense, committed crime that is undetectable by law enforcement when they search the property, undetectable by their phones. And if they were able to clear anything on their phones, that manipulation of their phones was also undetectable. And in a short period of time, on their spare time, they learned to pass a polygraph test. I don't think that's what happened here. I just don't. I don't. I struggle with believing that that is the case. All right, let's continue. Jane did not pass a polygraph. That would be her words. The actions shown true. Hold on. Janie took the polygraph test, and they told her that because of a condition that she has, which it says in the docs that she has a condition, which I don't think that she can fake her heart condition. That is detectable by the machine. All right. And that is going to somehow say that she's lying. Because you got to think, if one of them is involved, they're all involved. They're each other corroborate each other. Janie heard the kids at 9. Malaya heard the kids, and Daniel saw Lily and also heard the kids. And so if one of them is involved, they all have to be involved because they each corroborate each other. They 100% corroborate each other. And it would be a law enforcement officer's dream that if your two prime suspects have turned on each other, in fact, that is what you attempt to do when you have a suspect in mind, is you want to turn them on each other. You want them to start telling telling on each other. That's what they're doing. The whole real reason Malaya took the shirts and gave them to law enforcement, and they happened to be the shirts that he was wearing during this morning, was probably to do some sort of forensic test on it. So at some point, she began to be kind of, maybe not so necessarily suspicious, but she was following the orders of law enforcement, right? And they were covering they were dotting their I's and crossing their T's on this. But yeah, I just don't see how everybody else could have passed the polygraph test too. It'd be one thing if it was just one person, but it was 6. 6 people passed the polygraph test. It goes on to say that, and the extent of the ground search make it appear unlikely the 6-year-old Lily and 4-year-old Jack wandered into the woods. And so that's what a lot of the documents say, as far as that's what Daniel says, that's what Malaya says, that's what Janie says. That's what a lot of these folks say, that the extensive search of the woods. I'll be honest, guys, man, those woods look real dense, bro. Like, they look real dense. And I know of a lot of searches that were in a lot less dense area, more concentrated in a specific spot, and they still couldn't find anybody or evidence or the dogs or all those other things. I mean, even the Brian Laundrie case. I mean, look at that one. They had extensive searches. Now, I know there was a flood and some other things that happened in between there, but before that happened, there was an extensive search. And as it went away, there was an extensive search. And the guy was found, his remains were found in the exact same spot where his parents said that he liked to go and hike. And so those things happen, especially if you have a densely populated area where, you may not even be able to see 2 or 3 inches to your side on the ground because of the foliage that's there. So to me, I think that it's probably more than 50% likely that they wandered into the woods and maybe have gotten a little bit farther than most people think. But we'll break it down a little bit more. Here it goes on to say that online it's gotten ugly. An international obsession with the case is seeing self-crowned online sleuths and AI-driven video spreading theories of misinformation about the children and their families for profit. So right here, they're talking about a lot of the YouTubers and TikTokers and all these other folks, and they're saying that their ill intent their content is based off of misinformation, and they're spreading theories about the families. I mean, it's specifically about the families. So what families would they be talking about if it wasn't for about Daniel and if it wasn't for Malaya? And this article believes that is bad information that they're spreading. So, all these content creators that are out there that might be pushing that, these parents had something to do with it. This is, in my opinion, this article is directing this to you, that even they believe that based on all the evidence of cooperation, they don't probably believe that they had something nefarious either. And it seems like they're siding with the fact that if you may be spreading some bad stuff about these people. That's kind of the way it reads to me. Accusations, thinly veiled threats, and racial commentary are common on Facebook sites, with thousands of members pouring on every detail, factual or not, photo and social media accounts of family members. And I've heard about this. I've heard how some of the family members have been tormented. I've heard that here recently, somebody else outside of who live in that house with Daniel Martell and Janie has told me about some people that have been pulling up, that they have seen people pull up to their property and shine lights in their house and yell vulgar stuff and a bunch of other things. And it's crazy because they come up with these theories. And well, let me rephrase this. It's crazy because these people that go out there and do this are going based off of theories without evidence. You get what I'm saying? And so, but I do get it. I get why people are suspicious. I just don't think it's smart to go and harass people. I don't think it's a good deal. But I do get why people are suspicious. I'm not trying to say people shouldn't be suspicious either. I'm just saying you probably shouldn't do those things. Now, here are some of the warrants that are coming out. 12 released warrants, so applications. So this is a lot of them, right? And yeah, I get that polygraph tests are inadmissible in Canadian court, but they're still very effective, right? The IgG is also inadmissible in court, and it caught Brian Koberger's rear end real fast. So just because it's not admissible in court, don't mean it's not an effective tool. You know what I'm saying? So the warrants, 12 released warrant applications, contact summaries of the RCMP investigate efforts. They did GPS tracking data, communication with other records and from cell phones of the stepfather and the mother, video recordings from school buses operating in the area, electronic records from companies in the Montreal, Toronto, and Halifax of whose names and purposes are redacted, bank records of Martell and Brooks, text plus messages from May 1st and 2nd of 3 redacted phone numbers. Brooks Murray is said to have used text plus in other parts of the warrants. Video recordings from Quid Pass. I probably said that real wrong. Closed circuit television footage from redacted location. So they've looked into all these things, and like I said, that's just the warrants, right? I mean, that's not just what they did when they searched the property and stuff like that. Really looks like a lot. You know, they must have, in my opinion, I just find it hard that somebody, because I get it. There's some folks that say, hey, there's been people who have gone away with things and whatever. And I get there's a lot of people that have, but most of the people that get away with things don't cooperate. And that's why they get away with things. They don't talk. They don't say this. They're the only sole person involved in the crime. So there's nobody else that can talk against them. There's nobody else that can be turned against them, so to speak. Those are the scenarios when people get away with things. When somebody's being super cooperative to this day and continually talking to law enforcement, taking polygraph tests, giving up records, it's less likely that they're going to get away with the crime. Much like I mean, the chances are significantly low. Not saying it can't happen, but Daniel doesn't seem like the criminal mastermind when I speak to him. I could get away with something like doing that. He seems like a country guy, simple nature country guy. I wouldn't know if he knew how to manipulate his phone so he disappears or something. I don't know. Not even Brian Koberger could figure out a way to manipulate his phone and the manipulation aspect not be traceable too. Bank records, things like that. And then, obviously maybe an accident happened. Okay. I mean, that's one possibility, but for two of them to pass the polygraph test about that, I don't know. All right. Where Jack and Lilly were last seen. Brooks, Mary, and Martell both told the RCMP independently that the morning of May 2nd, they were in bed with their baby, Edo, in the trailer. They said that they could hear Jack and Lilly playing in the kitchen, and Lilly made and Millie at multiple points looked into the bedroom. Well, after a while, not hearing the children, Martell went out to check on them, and they were gone. Their boots and Lily's backpack, a wrench had been lodged at the top at the front of the door, which was still there, so meaning they went out the back door. Martell's mom, Jamie McKenzie, who lived in the backyard camper, says she heard the children playing outside, falling asleep, and woke up to Martell calling for their names. And that's all accurate. I saw that in the documents. Like I said, it's just so freaking hard to read. It's a lot easier to read off of my phone than it is off of the computer screen. And so that's why I'll keep it that way. We'll just go off of this instead. Martell then took the family car to go looking for him, searching the woods. Brooks Murray called 911 about 10 a.m. The last time Jack and Lily were confirmed to have been seen in public was the day before at 2:45 at Dollarama in New Gaslow. So there it is, right? I mean, that's your window. 2:45 to 10 a.m. 19 hours and 15 minutes is the window for these guys to have committed some sort of crime and hide not just the fact that they committed the crime, but hide the fact that they that there was a crime committed too. It's one thing to hide the evidence, but you also have to, like for instance, with the Brian Koberger case, you can go in there and you can delete, all this information, but you can't delete the missing spots. You get what I'm saying? Like those are going to be there. The evidence of manipulation will be there. So in this situation, they had 19 hours to something to have happened. And that's if it happened in that moment at 2:45, right when they had last been seen. But that's a 19 hours and 15 minutes for them to have done something, gotten away with it, hidden the manipulation of whatever it is that they're doing, because they're obviously lying, and then also pass a lie detector test a few days later. It's a lot. It's a lot for somebody to do, and not just one, but multiple people to do. And then also they turn on each other during the middle of it. It's like everything is working against them. And then being Daniel, Janie, and Malaya, everything has worked against them. They've taken the lie detector test. They've spoken. They've gotten their phones. They've done everything. I just struggle that they at that point have something to do with it as well. I'm not saying that they don't. I mean, obviously, law enforcement could be withholding some of these things, and we don't know. So it goes on to say the RCMP interviewed a woman who said they saw the children resembling Jack and Lily while traveling on Gairloch Road on May 2nd between 9:30 and 10 a.m. The woman says she saw a girl holding a young boy's hand walking down the side of the road towards Westville. She said the girl was white with darkish hair and pigtails and wearing a tank top with blue strings. She estimated the girl's age at 9 to 10 and the boy to be 5. Witness said just ahead of the children was a white woman estimated to be in her 50 to 60s. Man, that moved. With a loose cut haircut, and she stood by an older model light gold tan sedan that was parked on the shoulder with the rear passenger door open. Investigators are working to identify the children seen by the witness to determine if they are Lily and Jack. That's also interesting, right? Somebody saw somebody at that time, kids about the same age, on the side of the road, on that road there. That's interesting, but one of the things you would probably do in that scenario is you're gonna want to geofence, and it kind of seemed like that's what they did when they said they got. I'm gonna assume that's what they did. Let me rephrase it. They're gonna want to geofence all the phones. You're gonna want to pull all the phones that connected to the towers in the area, and see if there's somebody who don't belong there. Because if somebody picked up these kids as they were wandering on the side of the road, that's a crime of opportunity. Nobody was expecting these kids to be out there walking like that. So there's a crime of opportunity. You're not really planning for it. So there's a lot of things that probably go into those scenarios, like, for instance, not turning off your phone, not being prepared for those type of things. So just food for thought there on that. It said that they also received a report from an employee at a hotel in New Brunswick. See, and this is who it says it's from. It's from an employee at the hotel at New Brunswick. The name of the location, which are redacted, who claimed to have seen the children's biological father with Jack and Lily. The father had been separated from the mother since October 2021. RCMP was located him at his residence, and they also did some background stuff, and they were able to determine that he was Cody Sullivan was at his mom's house, and so he had nothing to do with it. But I was told that one of the speculations was that Malaya was sitting, at in her room until about 12:45, and then in the morning, around 1 o'clock, she calls to report that possibly Cody had the kids, and then that somebody else called and said that they saw Cody with the kids, and the theory was that maybe perhaps Malaya was trying to, shift the direction of the investigation towards Cody. And my thought was, well, one, like I mentioned before, those are two very separate investigations. If she goes in there and says that somebody's abducted them, they got to start investigating, differently versus if they went into the woods. So for her to have tried to focus in on an abduction of some sort would create that more invasive investigation into more of like the phones and everybody else that was there, which, like I said, it sounds like they did anyways. But it's a more invasive investigation at that point. And when we find out here that it wasn't Malaya that made that report of Cody, that the only one she made was that night, and it seems like she was up all night. And from what I've read, her thought process is they weren't gone for very long, and the search started fairly quickly because there was rescue folks around in the area. They should have found him, and so somebody may have taken him. And that's her thought process, and she's just going through everybody, just like everybody is, right? Everybody's trying to figure it out. Everybody's trying to point fingers at one person or another. And, she's probably doing the same thing. I mean, she's closer to this disappearance than anybody else. It's her kids that are missing. So it'd be only normal for her to have gone through those thoughts and thought process. All right. Real quick, I want to say welcome, Caroline, becoming the newest member. Thank you so much. All right. Polygraphs. Both Martell and Brooks Murray voluntarily underwent tests. Questions were asked of them are redacted, but both were found to have been answered truthfully. Sullivan also found that to answer redacted questions truthfully in 2 polygraph examinations, as did Wade Paris, boyfriend of Brooks Murray's mother, Cindy Murray. Janie McKenzie, mother of Martell, was found to have a physiology not suitable for analysis, and an opinion for polygraph examination was not rendered. She had something's up with something with the heart thing, which is nobody's business, right? That's her medical stuff. So I don't, she something with the heart. That's all I'm going to say. Search and rescue teams discovered child-sized boot prints, and this is about the footprints, on a pipeline through the woods, some distance behind the family home at 1407 Gairloch Road between the evening of their disappearance and following Saturday morning. There were clumps of them, and they were 2 different sizes. So this right here is the first time, and I hate to say this is the first time because I can't stand when people say, well, this is the first time we hear about this. It's just the first time I'm hearing about this, right? Doesn't mean it's the first time that this was publicly known. Doesn't mean it's not the first time that police were known. Like I've come across some folks that I've seen that'll say something to the effect like, Janie said something like, oh, well, this is the first time we hear about this. It's like, no, this is the first time. It's not the first time it was said. It's the first time you're hearing about it. But in the court documents, some of these things that they were saying were said to law enforcement in day one. So it's not the first time it was said. So I'm going to say this. This is the first time that I hear. I've not heard this anywhere else, and you guys correct me if you have. But it says here there were clumps of them, and there were 2 different sizes. And this is referring to the boot prints as 2 different boot prints that were out there. This is Crochet. Thank you so much, Crochet, for being the newest member. And I'll go through y'all's comments at the end of the show, guys. When we got a few more things to go through, and I'll definitely go through the end of the show. So there were clumps of them, and there were 2 different sizes. She said they were small in size and corresponded with what the children would wear. A cast was taken of 1 boot print, and it found to have the 29 marked on its tread. That number corresponded with the tread size of 11 child's boot. Using Brooke Murray's bank account records, RCMP were able to see that she had purchased size 11 children's boot for Lilly at Walmart in March. RCMP purchased some of the same boots from Walmart for their investigation. Search and rescue heard reports of people with kids out searching. So they were not sure if the boot prints belonged to Lilly and Jack. They did think it was an out of the way area for people to bring their kids to the search. Now, I have heard, and I don't know if it's true, and it's not in the court documents, but that those boot prints were found by one of Malaya's family members, which they do talk about the blanket and being found by one of Malaya's family members. And I do believe that Malaya's family members that found the blanket had young children with them. And so it is possible that those boot prints could have been those children. It could have been Lilly and Jack. I think they were fairly close to the blanket, though. It goes on to say that McKinsey told RCMP she didn't believe the children would have wandered away into the woods. Janie said Jack would not go for walks on his own. She said Jack and Lilly and Daniel went for walks in the woods all the time, and they had to carry Jack sometimes because he got tired and would just sit in one place. Janie says she does not believe the kids are in the woods. Which, again, that's where you would want to focus if you did something. And unless you put the kids in the woods, and yeah, obviously you don't want them to focus in the woods. But if something happened and you put the kids somewhere else and they're not in the woods, you're going to want them to focus there. You're going to say, hey, they must have wandered into the woods. Don't be investigating all this other stuff. Don't look into my bank records. I don't want to take a polygraph test. I'm not going to turn over my phone. I'm not going to talk to you. There's no reason to look into my house. They're in the woods. That's where you would want it to be focused at. Not necessarily on an investigation that involves more invasive means. All right. The pink blanket. All righty. So with the pink blanket, hold on. Interesting. Just got a text from a member on the scene. Okay. Let me download this and I'll see if I can bring that up in a second. Thank you so much for sending that to me. Pink blanket. On the evening of Friday that Jack and Lilly disappeared, family members found torn piece of blanket in the bushes off of Lansdowne Station Road. A kilometer from the house below it on the ground were some rags. Brooke Murray and Martell confirmed it was a piece of Lily's blanket. An RCMP dog unit searched the area but picked up no scent. On May 4th, another part of the blanket was found in the garbage bag at the end of the family's driveway. Brooks Murray said the blanket had most recently been used around the edge of a drafty window in the trailer. Brooks Murray and Martell had been together for 3 years. As of May, she said that while Martell was not the father of Jack and Lilly, he was an involved parent, and he would help her, especially when she was overwhelmed. He was not aggressive with the kids, but had a voice they would listen to. Martell worked 1 day a week at a sawmill in Westville. Family members said Martell and Brooks Murray were struggling financially. The day the children disappeared, Brooks Murray took their baby and left to stay with their mother. She blocked him on Messenger, and both Martell and Brooks Murray said they kept their location option on their phones open all the time so they could see their whereabouts. They provided their phones to RCMP. All right. So a lot here to kind of go through, right? And a lot to kind of break down. Now, one of the interesting things that I just read was that the other pieces of the blanket were found in the garbage, but that the garbage wasn't like up on the house. It says here that at the end of the family's driveway. So I'm assuming the end of the driveway, is that close to the house or is that at the street, right? I'm assuming this means at the street, which is a little bit more interesting, right? So let's break this down. We've talked about how if this was Daniel, if this was Janie, if this was Malaya, what would have had to have happened? They would have had 19 hours and 15 minutes to have committed a crime, or an accident would have happened during that time, and for them to cover that crime up. It doesn't appear that their home was cleaned. So it must not have happened there to a certain extent. There wasn't the sign. It doesn't sound like they found a scene where There was a big disturbance. It seems like there was a bit of a mess in places, according to documents that I've read. And so when you have like a mess and you have things like that, seeing a potential disturbance scene is kind of not difficult to discover. No sign of actual like altercation, no sign of blood, I would assume, which, there's more than one way a person can lose their life. That doesn't mean that they lost blood or anything like that, but there wasn't any of that. They were able to come up with I wouldn't even say come up with a story and stick with it, because they've all turned on each other. They would have somehow have had cooperated more than any, as much as possible, turned on each other, and still not and take lie detector tests and still not have law enforcement, have any idea that there's some sort of criminal involvement on their part. So then what could have happened? Could they have walked off? I think that there's some evidence that believe that's possible. There's the blanket, a couple of, not too far away, some footprints that somewhat match. This is what I was sent to right now. Let me pull it up real quick. And I'm going to get into who I think, we might want to just kind of keep an eye out on. All right. So just got a text from a member on the search. The police dog handler has located a very distinctive set of youth footprints on the natural gas pipeline. Seems like somebody was barefoot, some other shoe prints. I don't know how true this is or where this came from, but this was sent to me. Now, so let's work this backwards. Let's just say that if somebody did pick up the kids, right, it would have probably been a crime of opportunity. I'm assuming they did a search of the phones and stuff in the area. So it'd have to be somebody that lives close, right? Because cell service there is not good. In fact, in the documents, it does mention how Malaya had to turn her Wi-Fi calling off and go stand in a specific place so that she can make the phone call to 911 and to everybody else, so she can get service to go out. So service sucks there. They're in a valley. So that probably is a strong indication that if you're going to get like phone pings, until you get their phones, once you get their phones, the GPS on their phones is going to be pretty accurate of where that location of that phone is, right? But if you don't have a warrant or you don't have cooperation of somebody giving you that phone, the only thing you're going to have is to use their phone pings. And also, if you don't really know who you're looking for, and you're just looking at a bunch of phones in the area, you're not going to get a precise location. So you're going to end up looking for somebody who is probably close to the area, I would assume, because if they moved off their property, if they went further down the road, if they went 600 yards one direction or half a mile in the other direction, 110% honest with you, based on how shoddy cell service is out there, it's probably going to be indistinguishable of whether they moved from their house or not. Right? And so if you had somebody that lived close, could they have picked up the kids while maybe they were walking outside? Maybe. Now, there's this guy that interests me. Now, I'm not the type of dude that's going to go out there and throw this guy's name. I'm not going to throw his address. I'm not going to do any of those things, because I'm not going to accuse somebody for something I don't 100% know. And I don't 100% know this. But there's a guy that lives close who I've heard from 3 people did not allow law enforcement on their property to search while the kids were missing. In fact, I heard that this guy was upset that law enforcement was near his property while they were doing their search before they, around the time when he denied them to search his property. This person has apparently some sort of criminal past. Him and his brother have been run out of a town for a series of thefts, major thefts. Now, you don't get run out of a town just for being some petty thief. You got to be doing quite a bit of things to do that. Now, why do people steal? Is stealing that amount? That's a good question, right? In my experience, people have some expensive habits they want to pay. They sometimes have to come up with money with some other means, right? So this guy checks marks that dot. He's lives close. Claims he didn't know that that there was kids that lived at Martell's house, although his kids rode the same bus as Jack and Lilly. This is the same guy who apparently was cooperative enough to allow or to tell somebody that he heard a vehicle in the early morning hours driving back and forth, and he thought it was a 5-speed vehicle. Kind of suspicious why he was up in those early morning hours doing those, doing what he was doing. But he also has a loud vehicle, kind of in my opinion, maybe somewhat redirecting attention of what that vehicle was doing. Not necessarily saying that he had something to do with the doing with the case there, but because it was in 5 a.m. or between 12 and 5 a.m., somewhere around there. And the weird thing too is like, well, what about the pink blanket, right? So if you got a guy who's a thief, right, in my past, when I was in law enforcement, I dealt with a lot of people who were thieves and burglars and stuff. A lot of the people that were thieves and burglars, they didn't just steal from, inside of the house and stuff. They stole from the property. They stole from the yard. They stole from the trash, for things that they could turn around and, maybe clean up and sell or whatever the case may be. And so when I think about this pink blanket at the side of the road, I begin to wonder if, maybe this pink blanket was grabbed by somebody on their way in or out of that area. A thief would look at some of those things. And so I'm not going to identify who the guy is. I'm not going to say those things because I don't 100% know. But I see some red flags here. I see a guy who was open enough to say that there was a vehicle that was passing by and around when he has a loud truck that could be mistaken for that car. Cooperative to some extent, but really didn't want law enforcement near his property. And some people might say, hey, well, maybe it's because he has drugs or he has stolen property. It could be a bunch of reasons why he doesn't want cops there. One of those reasons could be because he has kids too. I don't know. Not saying he does. Just saying that would be another reason why somebody wouldn't want them, law enforcement on the property. I can't say that those other two reasons aren't plausible. It's 100% plausible, but you have 2 missing kids over here. I don't think you can discredit the possibility of somebody in the area refusing to allow law enforcement to check the property. Now, I've only heard it from 3 different people, and I have not heard it from him. So I don't know how true the denial was, but I've heard it from 3 people that he did not allow them on their property. Now, I know some people are going to say, well, he was a thief. Why don't you just go get a warrant? Well, you got to have a victim for that, for one. And you have to be looking for something specific if it's a theft, right? So, for instance, if I was going to go under the guise of a theft, I'd have to find a victim of that theft. I'd have to find property that we're searching out of that theft. And I have to find reasonable suspicion as to why they believe that this person was the person that committed that theft, and reasonable suspicion as to why that property is still on their property. And so there's a lot of aspects of creating a probable cause affidavit to search somebody's property in those instances. This person doesn't live near the footprints. Well, I mean, kind of, sort of. By the blanket, it's not too far off, but it's not really in the direction of of where the kids would have been or would have walked to, so to speak. And so, you can't just go in there and say, hey, we got 2 missing kids, so we're going to violate your rights and go into your house, go into your shed, go into your property, walk, the whole thing. It doesn't work that way. Now, I do know that Canada is a little bit different, but from all indications, it looks like they're a little bit more strict about certain things like this, from what I'm reading. And so, you got to have a lot of things in order to, you can't just say, hey, here's a warrant, judge. Sign me up, Scotty. Sign it for me. Let me walk in. I don't know about that one. I don't know about that one. But is it plausible that this guy maybe, and apparently one of the reasons why the four-wheelers wasn't there at Janie and Daniel's house was because of this dude. Because this dude has broken into their property before. So he's broken into their property. Now, I don't know if there's some sort of criminal thing about it, but I've talked to 3 people or 2 people who know about this, and one of them is not Daniel. One of them is not Daniel. And so I don't want people to think, oh, it's Daniel and Janie that are saying. No, one of them is not. That they suspected 2 different people that have suspected this man for breaking into the property of Daniel and Janie's property. All right. And so this guy also don't know they have kids there. I'm just not buying it. His kids and their kids rode the bus and never saw them, at the bus stop or anything like that. It's just it's a odd thing. All right. So they suspect him. No proof. No, I suspect him. This it's not they. let me rephrase that. I suspect him. When I've spoken to almost everybody, like when I've spoken to Janie or even Daniel about this. I don't know if I've spoken to Daniel about this guy, to be honest with you. I think I need to talk to him about him. But when I've spoken to Janie about this guy, they didn't think that he had done it. I was just like, oh, this guy doesn't, this guy has a criminal record, apparently. It sounds like he's done some time. I'm not sure though, but it sounds like it, based on the type of offenses he was alleged to have committed. If this guy is still committing these thefts, which it kind of sounds like that's what they were alluding to. This guy's out and about early in morning hours, whatever the case may be. And again, I have no idea. So that's why I'm not putting out his name, and I'm not putting out his address. I'm not putting out any of those things. But if you have somebody who is not cooperating with the investigation, who's not allowing people to search their property when there's 2 missing kids, that I'll be real. It's not like if you're walking the roadway, it's a pretty far walk. If you're walking along the road, if you turn and you walk along the other road to get to his property, it's kind of far. But if you cut through the woods, it's not. And so, you got a guy that doesn't want you to look at your property. He's got a suspicious past, put it that way. I don't know. I think it's suspicious. I do. I'm not saying anybody else does. I'm not saying that Daniel or Janie or any of these other folks. It's me, Daniel. I do. And so I don't even know if law enforcement's looked into them. They may have. They've looked into them. This is this is the other thing too, and that I've talked about this during the Brian Koberger case. It's just because we don't know about the investigation into somebody else doesn't mean that those investigations didn't happen. In the Brian Koberger case, they talked about. A lot of people were saying, oh, they targeted BK and they focused in only on him. And not necessarily. They surreptitiously took a cigarette butt from somebody else and did a DNA test on somebody else. And they did it secretly for a reason. Surreptitiously, that's what it means, secretly. So they did it secretly for a reason. Now, obviously, the guy was cleared. And so because he was cleared, there's not anything added to it. You're not going to find a criminal complaint or arrest warrant or any of those things of somebody that's been cleared. So that very well could be the situation here, which is the reason why I'm not going to name this dude. But I do think that there is a little bit of suspicions here, that there's somebody in the area who didn't allow law enforcement allegedly to look into his property, who didn't like law enforcement near his property, who made supposedly made some weird accusations about a vehicle driving back and forth being heard at early morning hours. And he has a loud vehicle himself, claiming not to know that, and I'm not necessarily certain 100% certain that this is the same guy, but I was told it was that they had claimed that they didn't know anything about the kids living there, or that there was kids that lived at that property. Even though there's some toys and things of that nature. But the blanket thing is one thing that throws me off. So if I had to take like a percentage guess, I'd say it's probably 65% most likely that they wandered off. And I'll say 35% something else happened. Only put it this way, about 30% something else happened where somebody picked them up. Because it's possible somebody picked him up off the side of the road. It may not even have been this dude. It had been somebody else if they wandered off into the road. And I probably give it a 2 to 3% chance that the parents had something involved that was nefarious. Now, accident, let me rephrase this back. I probably give it a 1% chance that something nefarious happened and they were able to pass lie detector test and all those other things. I highly doubt it. An accident, probably 2-3% chance. I still feel that they would have failed the lie detector test. Somebody would have. But that's just based off the information I know. So put a couple of stars, put a couple of, I know police have said no abduction. I just don't think you can rule that out, though. I just don't see how you can rule out a by chance abduction. That's the only thing that kind of bothers me. But put a couple of stars on your questions. Let me know what you guys are thinking. What is his name? I'm not going to say his name. Kind of weird that everyone got broke into, but Daniel, no, that was according to Daniel. According to Janie, they got broken into. So maybe it was before Daniel was out there. D&J would say anything to distract the attention from them. Yeah, but I mean, it's not only about saying anything. It's also passing polygraph tests. It's also them cooperating with law enforcement. It's with them giving their phones over to law enforcement, bank accounts, giving them a description of what they did the day before, law enforcement going out and finding video and finding them being truthful and honest the day before at where they were. And so, I mean, it's more than just them talking. And to be 110% honest with you, I don't follow 100% what they say. As I don't know if you guys can tell, I don't buy much of what they're saying as far as Malaya having involvement in it. That's what they both think. I don't buy it. And it doesn't mean I think that they did something to the kids. I just think that their theories, it doesn't make sense to me, the theory. I don't buy it. But at the same time, what I do follow is what law enforcement has put out there and what they have done, how they have investigated this case. And I don't see how Daniel, Malaya, and Janie could have outsmarted them, and not only outsmarted them, but manipulated any of the evidence that they turned over. And there not be any evidence of the manipulation. There not be any evidence of some sort of nefarious act or some sort of talking of cooperation of covering up something that was an accident. Yeah, I just don't. It's not them that I believe to a certain extent. It's what I'm following as far as what law enforcement has put out there, what they have done, and what the results of those investigations is what is talking to me. That's what I'm reading. I'm reading the results of the investigations and the results of what they did. And the investigators in this case have investigated this in a manner that would have, if there was something that would have happened, in my opinion, to those kids, based on the amount of cooperation on everything that they turned in, the fact that they did lie detector tests, and the fact, and more certainly than anything else, the fact that they have turned on each other. Malaya and Daniel are not on good terms. They're going through a custody battle, and they're blaming each other. This is a law enforcement officer's, dream, for your suspects. All of these things, you dream your suspect's going to come in and talk to you every day. You dream your suspect's going to take a lie detector test. You dream the suspect's going to come in here and give you their phone. You dream that the suspect's going to come in here and give you your bank records. It's a law enforcement's dream to get all that information. And it's 19 hours and 15 minutes from the time that the kids are seen alive to the time that they call 911. So they must have done a lot of work in that time to overcome those obstacles that I just mentioned, and also figure out how to pass a lie detector test in a short period of time. I'm just not buying it. And where are they going? I mean, are they going to the public library where they're not searching how to fake a lie detector test on their phone? They're going through some untraceable means. I'm just not buying it. I'm not. I don't think that these guys are this criminal mastermind. This would be every investigator's dream scenario. If you truly suspected these folks, which I believe they did. I mean, they wouldn't go into this effect, calling in the different polygraph testers to come in and conduct their tests. They wouldn't be doing all these things if they didn't, have some sort of inclination, like, all right, something don't sit right. And there's some things here. There's some red flags. I don't fault anybody for being suspicious against them. None whatsoever. I too was suspicious when I first looked at it, but I tend to follow what law enforcement are doing and the evidence, and that's kind of always cleared a pretty clear pathway of what's going on, and which is one of the reasons why I've been able to, I don't want to say predict, because it's not really predicting, but I've been able to deduce with a fair amount of accuracy with the cases that I've covered what has been going on based on following law enforcement. Law enforcement has told me everything in the Brian Koberger case that I needed to know, in the Richard Allen case that I needed to know, Karen Reed case, and all of those with a fair amount of accuracy I've been able to deduce to what happened based off of what law enforcement has said and done. And I feel that I've been able to do the same with this case. Okay. I think the neighbor is odd as well, but I do not think he took the kids. I couldn't tell you. I just think it's weird that you got some kids missing and you don't want, law enforcement to look on your property. But it could very well be for a multitude of reasons. He could have drugs. He could have stolen goods. He's allegedly a thief. Those could be reasons. But as much as those could be reasons, missing kids nearby, where they're not found in the woods, you're not seeing numbers that should not be in the area, right? Because that's if this was somebody randomly driving down the road and saw the kids and like, hey, pick up these kids right now, you have a pretty close-knit time frame of when this occurred. Do the geofencing on the phones, on the cell towers, boom, you got this phone. This phone number, when you trace it back to who it belongs to, doesn't live in the area, has no reason to be there. Now you got somebody to go talk to, right? But I'm assuming that's not the case. And so you have to focus in on somebody close, somebody within a X amount of radius that you couldn't tell if they were at home or if they were there, which is probably a large area. I'll be honest with you, given how what it sounds like as far as cell coverage goes. You're probably looking at one phone ping in that area covers multiple miles. So you literally could be at Daniel's house or a mile or two down the street and the phone ping couldn't tell the difference. You know what I mean? And so I don't know exactly how far it is, but I'm assuming it's a pretty good distance. And so the person that if they wandered off and somebody picked them up, you're looking for somebody who probably resides close that isn't going to populate up there on that type of warrant. So that way they're going to mask. It's going to be, and it's not on purpose. It's just because the cell service is there. It's not some criminal mastermind aspect of it. Now, if you had their phones specifically, that's different because there's GPS stuff on the phone and things of that nature. That's different than looking at phone ping. So like when Daniel and Malaya turned over their phones, that's a different scenario than looking at their specific phones with the GPS and looking at phone pings. Completely different things. Janie didn't let them check her RV at one point either. Yeah, but eventually it happened, right? And so it's kind of like the kids missing school, right? And everybody's like, oh my God, they missed school for a couple of days there. Yeah, but then they were seen on camera on Thursday night. You get what I'm saying? Like if something happened in Janie's trailer, and let's just say she didn't let them see, the inside for whatever reason, when they went back in there, they must not have detected whatever she hid or whatever she cleaned. You know, there was no there wasn't bleach or any of those. I mean, it's just there's signs and evidence of cleanup, of cover up, of a lot of things that can happen. And so in this scenario, she eventually did let them go in there. And again, there's a lot of other things that happen. And I 100% believe that, you know, I agree with you. Some things are suspicious. But when you see what law enforcement went through in this case, I find it really difficult to believe that they outsmarted the cops in this manner to do everything that's here. Really, really do. I think Janie's in the live chat. How's it going, Janie? Does the neighbor's past crimes include, you know, against children or just major theft? I don't know. Richard Allen didn't have a background check, and he had kids, and he ended up taking the life of 2 kids in a brutal way. You know, the thing is, when you have major theft, right, it's usually to pay for a habit. When you're on that habit, you usually do things you don't normally do. Right? You know, I wouldn't be surprised if that's what the case was. But Richard Allen, maybe he went out somewhere that morning, got something he shouldn't have gotten from somebody. It affected his mind in a weird way. And he ended up committing a double homicide on 2 little girls, even though he had 2 little girls of his own. Or he had 2 kids of his own. You know? Brian Kopiger went out there and killed 4 students. He didn't have a prior history of murder. He didn't have a prior criminal history at all. I think he had only theft. Stole his sister's phone. A couple of burglary charges too. You know, I don't put a lot of weight into what they didn't do before. It's what are they doing now? And how can it lead to this day? Because in the end, the wrong place, the wrong time, and the wrong bad circumstances can turn people into the ugliest of people and the meanest and the most despicable things. And people do things that you would never believe. You know, even Richard Allen's wife and family have a hard time believing what he did, even though he confessed to it too. Brian Koberger's family. So, yeah, I don't know. Like I said, this is the reasons why I'm not giving out his name or information. Because I don't know. Someone can be a thief. That doesn't make them a child abductor. No, but it's kind of weird when they're a thief and then they've done some time and then maybe there's reasons behind the thief. We got to look a little bit more into it, right? Shannon, why are they a thief? What are they stealing for? Right? Shannon, and then you got to factor in, you know, everything else that plays in, because a lot of people can be a lot of things that doesn't make them what they end up becoming. Like I said, Brian Koberger was a PhD student in a criminology class, studying criminology, and he became a quadruple homicide. Ted Bundy wanted to be a lawyer. Ted Kaczynski was a child prodigy. You know, I mean, the list can go on. You mean Alex Murdaugh was a prominent lawyer. You know, just because there was something in this or that, that doesn't mean that they're incapable. You know, I would think more likely than somebody who is a major thief would be more capable of committing a crime than somebody that doesn't have a criminal record, right? And the reason behind that is because what are they stealing for? What is this for? What are the, you know, in my experience, a lot of people that burglarize, a lot of people that break in, it's to pay a habit, right? That habit usually comes with mind-altering effects, is what I'm trying to say. I'm not sure what you're referring to, Kent. How's it going, my man? Hope you're doing well. We don't know. I heard it from 3 different people. It was 3 separate individuals. again, and I got this a lot too, guys, when I was covering the Brian Koberger case. And those that have been watching me since then, I had this thing called Psychic Daniel, where I would predict something or I would say something and it would typically come true. A lot of that was because I was able to deduce information that was out there. A lot of that was because I got information. And one of my things that I would tell people was, you may not know those things to be true. That doesn't mean that either I don't know those things to be true or that law enforcement don't know those things to be true. Those are all separate, right? And so let's try not to think that because anecdotally we may not know something that somebody else may not know something. Because oftentimes, and like I've mentioned this before, I've been contacted by about 8 people that are very close to this. And I've gotten some information I think that's not really out there yet. I mean, shoot, I got the entire thing. Now I can't read it off of here because it's kind of hard, but on my phone, it's a lot easier to read. It's actually not that difficult now that I'm looking at it. But on my phone, it's easier to read. Did they run a background check on the men that were in that area about the same time? The men walking to the cabin, man nearby a car. So the man nearby in a car, I think is it the black SUV that it came out? I think that person was helping Daniel search. I think it was one of somebody that he knows that was going out there to help him search. A background check on everybody. I don't know the laws in Canada and how they can do those things. I know in the United States, you can't just run a criminal history report on somebody just to run one. You have to have a reason to do it. In fact, I know of a couple of scenarios where in some of the larger municipalities, I had overheard through the grapevine where some officers were, I think one dude was running background checks for like an employer of his friend or something of that nature because he didn't want to pay for him. And the dude got hit with a felony, the police officer. So, I don't know the rules in Canada. I don't know, and obviously that's a completely separate scenario here. But I don't know the rules there as far as how easy they can run a CCH or a computerized criminal history report on somebody. I would assume they did a background check on things. But here's the thing: from what I heard, I don't think law enforcement needed to do a background check on this specific neighbor. It seems like, from what I've heard, that they were well aware of who he was. They didn't have time to get the evidence out of the RV. They searched it while everybody was on the property. Well, there you go. Good deal. Good deal. Why would a 6 and 8-year-old wander off without being told to? Man, 6 and 8-year-olds are hard to control. I mean, when I was that age, I ran off, I don't know how many times. Fortunately, I never ran off too far. But yeah, I mean, there are some kids that wander off. There are some kids that run off, and some kids you have to put a leash on, keep them from running off. But yeah, it seems like if these kids were like active, they could have. I think they could have easily wandered off. They would have had, let me pull this down so I can put you guys over to the big screen that I have. They would have had probable cause, had probable cause because they were still on conditions that they could have been able to search the property. They wouldn't have been able to search Buddy's buildings. So, the problem with the property and the building aspect is I don't think so. As far as the probable cause affidavit or probable cause to search the property. What's the crime? You have to have a crime first to search it. Now, if you're thinking that you have reason to believe the kids are there, all right, well, what's your PC to believe that the kids are there? I think it's a lot harder to find some evidence on somebody like that who's being uncooperative, who lives in the area, so that way when they do the phone ping stuff, you can't determine if they were at their house, if they were a mile down the road, or whatever the case may be. It's a lot more difficult to try to pinpoint something on that from that scenario. If you're going with some sort of theft, all right, and you're using that as a premises just to get on the property, we need a victim. You need an item that you're searching for. You need a probable cause to make you believe that he's took it, and why you believe that it's on the property. What do you have that makes you believe it's on the property, and where? Usually warrants aren't open like that. I mean, sometimes they are, but typically, like, there's specific areas where you have to get permission to look into. And so, again, this is all United States stuff. Canada could be 100% different. So, to me, I think it's a little bit harder to get a search warrant just for somebody like that. Now, if he's on parole in the United States, it wouldn't be that difficult. If he's on parole, call his PO, and boom, bada beam, you're in there. I don't know how it works out there. I don't know if he's on parole. I don't know if he's on probation. I don't know if he's, I don't know any of those things. I just know that a few of the things about some of the crimes he may have committed. And so, in the United States, it'd be a little bit different and easier, but I don't know about in Canada. And let's see, did the RCMP confirm they did a lie detector test and share result? Yeah, they did do that, and they shared the results. But Janie has told mistruths about other things, in my opinion. I think that the expectation of the victim's family members is wildly high sometimes. I was listening to Sonny and on Crime and Shame, and they were talking about how, there was a call for law enforcement at 10, and that they said 12 minutes, and it was actually 27 minutes. And then that, Daniel said he ran into the woods for 30 seconds. So if you add 30 seconds to this and 1 minute to that, and I'm just like, man, you're looking at a lot of little times that they're saying. And I think a lot of them are just kind of like guesstimations, to be honest with you. When they're answering questions like, oh, I only ran in there for 30 seconds. It may have been a lot longer than that. It may have been a lot shorter than that. Unless he's timing himself, which if he is, that's weird. Right. But it don't sound like that's to be the case. It sounds like a lot of these things are estimations, and people are holding down these little things, like real little things. Now, if it's different, you want to look for big red flags. Let's look at the young boy, the Haro case out there in California. That little boy is most likely deceased. They've arrested his parents for murder. His parents were cooperating and then immediately stopped. So that's a big red flag, something that's not happened here. Out of the evidence that they've given, they were able to determine some things that were false and fake, and some real red flags. Like, for instance, she said that they went to to a football game, a public place where, or practice, and then she went to go get the mouth guard. Nobody at the football place, the practice of the game, I can't remember what it was, saw the baby. There was a funeral that occurred a couple of weeks before that, and there was video of them there without the baby. All right. That's not the case here. There's footage at, the day before, without the, with the kids there. And so, had they been missing and there was no footage, because if they didn't go to school in the manner that they didn't, and there was no footage, or there was footage and the kids aren't in the footage, right? Like if they say, yeah, we went out there, we had the kids, and then there's the footage there, and the kids aren't there. Now that is a red flag. Now that is an inconsistency. Somebody saying I called at 10 and police arrived 12 minutes later, and you look and it was actually 12:30 when they arrived. That's not something that's major. Witness testimony, even if it's somebody themselves, is not accurate. You cannot look at witness testimony and you have to take it with a huge grain of salt, because witness testimony is highly inaccurate. We can look at a bunch of different cases. The Richard Allen case, there was 3 individuals that were walking out of a park that saw Richard Allen that gave 3 different descriptions. We have Dylan Mortensen that saw Brian Koberger, who didn't necessarily give 3 different descriptions, but was unsure about everything that she had seen, and couldn't describe certain things, and was so confused she didn't call 911 for 12 hours or 8 hours or whatever it was. So, there's going to be some things that don't add up sometimes, but that's because we don't have all of the components to the questions. That's the other thing that kind of bothers me sometimes is when I was doing the Brian Koberger case, people were like, it don't add up. And I'm like, how's it going to add? How would it add up if you don't have all the components? You don't know everything that's going on. And so without all the math, components, of course, it's not going to add up, but here we have quite a bit of the stuff that they did, at least when it came to the investigating aspect towards Daniel, Janie, and Malaya. Janie gets her timelines messed up. Someone said in this chat that they get broken into after the kids went missing. So it could have been anyone, given they are in the spotlight. They are deflecting. I've not heard that. I've talked to them. I've not heard that somebody tried to break in afterwards. I heard that somebody tried to break in beforehand, which is why the forerunners or the four-wheelers weren't there. That is what I have seen. I've not seen what you're saying here at all. And again, timeline and trying to get little intricates of the timeline, I think, is a wild expectation to have. I mean, could you imagine going through some of the most, the worst moment in your life? Let's just say that they had nothing to do with this. Can you imagine the stress and the duress and the panic and everything else, and then expected to be able to recall information with a high level of accuracy down to the second? I think it's a wild expectation, to be honest with you. But we can try and experiment. I did this in the Brian Koberger case. I invited people to come on the channel, and I was going to put the lights on them, bright face, everything center face. I'll ask you some simple questions and see how duress and stress affects you when there's thousands of people watching, and see how accurate you can come out with information. Not talking about you specifically, Drippy. I'm talking about anybody in general who likes to question the accuracy of people who answer questions under duress. People will look at victims' family members in the Brian Koberger case and say, oh, why did they answer it this way? Why did they answer it that way? Like, they're pretty mad. They're upset, and they're probably nervous being in front of the cameras. A lot of people are real big when, behind the computer and say certain things, but let's put the camera on you and we'll ask you some simple first grade questions about certain things. And let's see if just the spotlight and the fact of knowing that thousands of people are watching you in that moment, if that affects your ability to answer those questions appropriately. Because I can tell you that I've done it before, and it didn't work out for a lot of people in the manner that they thought. I mean, this is why when we see, like, for instance, game shows, and you see people clam up and not answer the simplest of questions. Now, a lot of those people have been prepped and prepared, and they're answering questions for a game show. This is a situation about, the missing kids. So, to me, I get, everybody's hanging in on every word and everything that they say. But like I said, and I've taken this from the Koberger case when I've talking to the victims' family members in that case, I'm like, you have some emotional people here. And usually emotion doesn't result in a lot of accuracy. Like, for instance, Steve had told me that they had spoken with Hunter Johnson. And Hunter Johnson was the person who had arrived at the crime scene on 1122 King Road and discovered the bodies. And in their conversation, Steve took what Hunter said as that he went up there and he couldn't get through the door because one of the bodies was blocking. And it was misheard. You had two men who were emotional. You had two men who were hurting. And one had seen something greatly disturbing, and another who had his daughter's life taken away from him in a very horrific manner. And they misheard things, and they portrayed them differently. And when I put them out there, a lot of people were pointing at them saying, oh, they must be lying. They must have had something to do with their daughter's death. And I was like, are you freaking crazy? Just because they got something inaccurate or something wrong? I couldn't understand it. But, and I'm not going to do that here. And I'm not going to point out names of people, which is why even the person that I suspect should be looked at. I'm not saying that he did anything. I'm just saying that law enforcement, not us, not you, not me, not these random people that are going to drive by these people's house, not them. Law enforcement really need to look into this person. If he truly has some sort of record and he truly did not allow law enforcement to search his property and he didn't want law enforcement near his property, I would 100% believe that they should have at least Give them a second look at the very least. Right. But I mean, how is Janie Word reliable? It's not so much that she's reliable. She also has the word of two other people. So Malaya and Daniel heard and saw the kids. And so the only thing that Janie has to say that has any importance in here is that she heard the kids outside at a certain time. And so it'd be one thing if the two other people that have some sort of corroboration that the kids were alive that morning, if they didn't take the lie detector test, or if they didn't pass the lie detector test and she couldn't, all right, you have a point there. But she becomes reliable on what she said based on the fact that the other two people, that her word or whatever she actually brings value into this case, which is what she saw that morning, well, it's corroborated based off what the people who did take the lie detector test had to say. Because like I mentioned this from the get-go, if one of those persons, whether it be Janie, Malaya, or Daniel, if somebody did something, one of them did something, they all covered up because they corroborate each other. Daniel was there in bed with Malaya. Daniel saw Lily. Malaya heard Jack and Lily. And Janie heard both of them outside. And so you can't say, all right, well, Malaya did something. Well, Daniel, you slept right next to her all night. Same thing goes for Malaya. And Janie can't say, well, something weird happened with them. They did something. She heard them outside. So it's they all corroborate each other. And so like when it comes to like the other part of her word, the only thing I'm really taking in as far as her word goes is what she saw that morning, what she heard. There's not much that she can put in outside of that. You know what I mean? How far could two little kids walk in that short of a time? I don't know. I mean, that's a good question. Look up the missing 411 with David Pilates, I think is his name is. There's some kids that have wandered off miles in the woods. In national forest. That's all he investigates is national forest disappearances. And there have been kids that have wandered miles into the woods, found miles. There was one kid that was found, I think it was like 4 miles away and through some rough terrain. I think he was like 2 years old. It was a toddler. And so, when they talked to him, and this was the conspiracy aspect, they said some hairy man or whatever the case. But the disappearance was real. Where they found the kid was real. What he said and his interpretation of things obviously are the interpretation of a toddler. You don't know. And he's, as he's growing up, he don't remember. He was a toddler when this disappearance occurred. But yeah, he was like 2-3 years old. Some kid wandered off like 3-4 miles away. And I think he had to get through some pretty like water and stuff. I mean, it was crazy. And when they found him, he had like, it didn't look like he went through that far of walking. So, now I get it. I get how far can they go in such a short period of time. I don't know. But to me, I think that if somebody did do something to them, it would make sense that it would have to be somebody from that area. Like I said, because of the whole phone pings and stuff, it's either somebody that's, that can't be indistinguishable, or you can't distinguish from their phone movement from them being at their home per se, or out in front of Daniel's house, or a mile away, or whatever the case may be. And I exclude, like I said, Daniel and Malaya from those because they handed over their phones. So it's not like law enforcement was reliant on their phone pings. They were relying on their GPS chip from their phone. So it's a big different story when it comes to the accuracy of Daniel and Malaya's phone as far as location services go, versus somebody that they may suspect who they don't have enough to get a warrant for. And all they can do is maybe perhaps do a warrant on the phone tower to see who connected to the phones in that area during that specific time that they're looking for. That's going to be a lot less accurate. The neighbor, like I say, all you have to do is Google what they were up to. My opinion, everyone knows not to put crimes. Oh, you'd be surprised how many people don't do that, though. Shannon. It's actually more common than not. Even Brian Koberger, the guy who was this mastermind that tried to cover his tracks, was searching things up like paranoia, wiretapping, all these things that were indicated that he was becoming paranoid, that they were searching for him. He was searching for a new vehicle and how to clean his vehicle, how to sell his car, where to sell his car. I mean, there was a lot of things that even Brian Koberger, who was a criminal mastermind, in my opinion, when you look at what a criminal mastermind could be, Brian Koberger fits that narrative. He's a PhD student. He had a master's degree in criminology. He understood the investigative means and manners, and yet he made stupid mistakes that got him caught. And yet we're supposed to believe that Daniel Martel and Malaya and Janie were able to outdo that. I doubt it. Blue Jay goes, is Janie here in the chat? I thought I saw her earlier. I'm not sure if she's still in here. Tint has a quiet car. I'm not sure who Tint is. Janie did not take a lie test. No way she did not. She tried to take one, but they and that's what the documents say too. They administered one, but because she has some issue with the heart, as far as the reading goes, they weren't. She wasn't able to take the test. They wouldn't have been able to have said one way or the other, and so she legitimately has a physical condition that can't be faked. I mean, it's not like law enforcement are like, oh, you have a physical condition, so we're just going to take your word for it. But that's not how it works. I know exactly what went down there. And she voluntarily went in there and was cooperating and wanted to take the test. And in my opinion, I think she probably would have taken the test again and again and again and would have done it now. I mean, at the end of the day, what was her contribution as well? I mean, her contribution to this was that she heard the kids outside in the morning. You know, who you want to target in this scenario. If you think Janie has something to do with it, then Daniel and Malaya have something to do with it. And both of them passed it. You know, we just can't discredit something we don't want to see because it goes against what our narrative could be. We got to look at all of it. Got to look at it all. All righty, guys. Well, I've been on here probably a little bit longer than I needed to be. In fact, yep, I am. I was supposed to go with the wife somewhere, and she already left me here behind. Let's see. Law enforcement is saying there's no evidence of an abduction, and I'm wondering what percentage of abductions actually have evidence of an abduction. That's a good question, Sub. You know, to me, I don't think you can discredit the evidence of an abduction to the extent of a crime of opportunity abduction. Like, for instance, I don't think anybody walked into Malaya and Daniel's house or property to the extent of the fence line. I don't think anybody passed that fence line and took those kids away. I think most likely that the kids wandered off to the road, and that there's a possibility, if they're on the road walking, that there's a possibility that the wrong person at the right time may have been on the road at the same time. You know, going through the wrong stuff in his mind for whatever reason, or her mind, and something happened, right? That's a possibility. I don't think you can exclude that. I think there are certain things you can exclude based off the evidence that you have, and we've already kind of gone through all those. But I'll continue since the wife left me behind already. Well, please stop calling people who get away with crimes as criminal masterminds. You don't need to be a criminal mastermind to get away with a crime. No, you don't need to be a criminal mastermind. But if you're cooperating at the same time and doing everything and turning in all the evidence, you're not a criminal mastermind. And you don't need to be a criminal mastermind, but you also need to not cooperate. There's a lot of things that have to happen in order for you to get away with a crime. You have to have a solid, if you're going to talk, you have to have a solid alibi in the sense of somebody backing you up, which they don't have. You know, Malaya and Daniel have turned on each other. You're not going to want to take a lie detector test, which they did. I don't see criminal mastermind behind these folks. Now, I'm not saying that, like you said, I'm not saying you have to be a criminal mastermind to be to get away with something, but to pass a lie detector test, to manipulate your phone so that it cannot be discovered, the manipulation nor what you hid, to cover up something with your bank records, to continually cooperate with law enforcement and still get away with it. It's tough. I mean, you kind of have to be a criminal mastermind, in the sense. And if you don't believe that they are, then there's a good possibility that they didn't commit a crime here. That's what I'm trying to say. No warrant for what? Let's see. Why are they not looking for the kids? No one in the family has been looking for these kids from day one. Daniel has. He's been out there quite a bit. Now, Malaya hasn't. And that's one of the things that really made Daniel suspicious of Malaya. Really, really suspicious. Why? Well, they were searching. I mean, what do they want? What do you want them to do? Continue to go in their backyard and search in the wooded area? According to everybody, everything's been cordoned off. I mean, everything's been searched in the immediate area. The persons that should be doing the most here, to be 110% honest with you, is Malaya. And she's the biological mom. Not saying that Daniel doesn't have a responsibility, but it certainly appeared that he was doing everything he could to search. He was out there quite a bit. There's a lot of reports, interviews with him out on the trail, out on the side of the road, looking for the kids, being super active. So, I'm not sure, what you mean there. Yes, Ellie did confirm the lie detector test. And it's not from Daniel saying it. It's in the documents that all of them passed. You're closed-minded, Dan. Look at the gray, not just the black and white. No, well, I look at the evidence. And I look at how the evidence, shapes things out. Once I discredit something, I don't go back and look at it. A lot of people used to tell me the same thing. Oh, you got to look at Bryan Kohberger with an open mind. And I'm like, why? Why do I have to look at it if there's something that's already been proven not to have occurred? If they've already cleared somebody, why do I have to continue to look at somebody? If there is something that is an indication that says that without a shadow of a doubt that this person didn't commit something, and I'm not talking about this case specifically, but why should I continue to believe in the possibilities that have been debunked or cleared? I don't do that. I follow the evidence. If the evidence points in one direction, that's the direction that I follow. If the evidence points in another, I go the other way. That's how I've been. That's the way I've conducted all of my shows, is evidence-based show here. And so now when I talk about speculation, I bring the evidence behind it. Even with this guy, criminal record, didn't want police to search his property, didn't want police near his property, may have been misleading police or law enforcement or reporters with false information of a potential vehicle at 5 a.m., which may have been him because this person also has a vehicle that's quite loud. And from all accounts is and has been seen driving around. And this is from 3 different people in odd hours of the night. And so now I don't have anything else to say that it's him. So I'm not going to name his name and I'm not going to point in that direction. And I'm not going to say, guys, go look at his house or any of those things. But I will say that law enforcement probably should look into this a little bit stronger. Not us, not you, not me, not anybody watching this that doesn't have a law enforcement background. Them. Daniel, do you not think that the initial denial of searching the trailer was suspicious? Yeah, but I mean, it's kind of like when in the Bryan Kohberger case, when the Probergers were saying, hey, in the beginning, they thought it was a Sentra, and then they thought it was a 2011-13 Elantra. I don't care about that. I care about what they think now. What is it now? What happened now? What does the evidence now happen? Did they eventually search that place? Did they search it during that day? How soon after it was before that initial, denial, did they search it? Was it relatively soon? Was it long enough that Janie could have cleaned up the place and then re-dirtied it up because Her place did not appear to be spick and span clean, right? Like you would expect to find from somebody to clean up a place. Was there evidence of a cleanup? You know, there's a lot more that goes into it just other than the action. You know, you got to look at it from a multi view, like take a 1,000-foot view above of what the specific accusation is, and then say, all right, what's around it? What encompasses it? Did they do a search? When they did do a search, what did they find? Did they find anything? You know, those are the things that matter. Now, initially, 100%, I would be just as much as you, 100%. Hey, that's suspicious. And if she never allowed, and it had to be a warrant that forced them to go and walk in there, then I too would have still been suspicious about that. But that wasn't the case. It didn't end up like that. You know, it ended up with them searching it by your permission because there wasn't a warrant. That's one of the, you know, they put out 12 warrants that they released. Not one of them was a search warrant for their property. They didn't need it because they had permission. That should be a huge clue here, that out of the 12 warrants, not one of them is a search warrant for the property. Now, I'm going to go back and reread them, but I'm pretty sure that even in the article, it said that that wasn't the case. Not one search warrant was for their property. And you don't need a search warrant for something you have permission to go and search. Let's see. Sarah comes in with $6.99. This next week was junk week in the area. Someone not from the area could have been driving around looking for stuff to resell or recycle, picked up the kids. It's possible, you know, and it goes back down to I would think it would be somebody from the area. Somebody not from the area, they're going to populate pretty easily on a geofencing, or when you go out there and you get a warrant for the cell phone towers. Somebody not from the area is going to stick out like a sore thumb, especially if they weren't planning on committing a crime like this. You're looking at a crime of opportunity in this situation. And so people usually don't prepare in the same manner with a crime of opportunity. And so their phones probably would be on more than likely in those scenarios. And I think they would have probably been picked up. Like they would have been found. And once you get found, it's not hard. Once you have your eyes on a suspect, it really isn't hard to retrace the evidence. Now, in some places, and sometimes it is, depending on how long it takes for you to come in contact with your suspect, right? So if it takes a while for you to come in contact with your suspect, some things video can be rolled over, you know, those type of things can happen. But if you come relatively in touch with your prime suspect right away, there are things that have to be done. Like, I mean, in the look at the Chris Watts case. You know, how did he get busted? Because he had to leave his house at a specific time and do something that he wasn't normally accustomed to doing, and he got caught on a small corner of the of a video camera, right? You know, if you had a phone number of somebody that was in the area and they didn't belong there, you know, you find out who they are, you find out who you know, where they live, you canvass their neighborhood and you ask their neighbors, you know, if they're in a distance where you can, obviously they live in a rural area, it might be a little bit more difficult, but if they're not from the area and they're in the area, you canvass the neighborhood, see if you can get some footage, see if they left that morning, when they came back, you know, from footage from across the street or from wherever. You know, if there's businesses that are en route from that area to where their house is, you're going to want to try to get surveillance, see what you see inside the car as it passes by. This happened in broad daylight. So see if you see anybody inside of the cab of the vehicle, see if you see anything disheveled. You know, there's a lot of ways that you can capture somebody doing something by just kind of working it backwards and following what it is that they would have had to have done to have completed this crime, which is another reason why I don't believe that Daniel, Janie, or Malaya had anything to do with it, because that would have been done with them. They would have worked their life backwards to try to figure out if there was any indiscrepancies, real indiscrepancies, not a matter of like a couple of minutes or false, possible like inaccurate memories from that early moment when they were in most duress, most panic, most under stress. Real inconsistencies. Like, oh, you said you were here with the kids. We got a video of you and there's no kids with you. That's an inconsistency. Oh, you said you were here at this place, but your phone says you were across country or across the city over here. That's a real inconsistency. Oh, you say you've never been over here, but we have a video of you entering this area over here that you say you've never been into. That's an inconsistency. Oh, he ran up in the woods for 30 seconds and came back. That's not an inconsistency. Hello, Belinda. Belinda says my house has never been searched. Well, I mean, did they ask you? And good to see you. I know that you're the grandmother. I want to say sorry for everything that's going on. You're the biological grandma, and I want to say sorry for what you guys must be going through. I know it must be hard for you as well, having your grandchildren missing. And, I hope that we can find truth and stuff in what happened. That's what I aim to do here with my channel. That is all we talk about here, is just, try to follow the evidence and the facts. And honestly, we follow law enforcement here. And what I mean by that is law enforcement is going to tell us everything we need to know. In the Brian Koberger case, there was a screenshot that had came out of a vehicle that was passing by at 3:45 in the morning. And then shortly after that, law enforcement was searching gas stations in nearby cities. That told me that up until that point, law enforcement were unsure that the vehicle left the town of Moscow, and that they were still searching within the Moscow area, and they had no information that the vehicle left until that screenshot came in of the vehicle coming in from out of town. And then they begin to search out of town. So that's what I mean by following the cops. You follow law enforcement, they're going to lead you to what they believe. They're going to lead you to what is going on, what they suspect. And if there's, searching a certain thing or investigating a certain way, that's usually an indication of what they're thinking based on the evidence that they have, which could be a clue as to what kind of evidence they do have. I mean, there's so much you can deduce based on what law enforcement is doing. And that's what we do here on this channel. If so innocent, why all the lies? I mean, I don't think they're all lies. I think there's just a lot of inaccuracies. I know a lot of people are looking at, for instance, the pink blanket. Daniel is saying it's not theirs because he threw it away. Malaya says she threw it away too. Why would they believe a blanket that is found X amount of, feet, yards, or I don't know how far it was, somewhat down the road, that's going to be theirs if they threw it away and they knew they threw it away. And so in the end, it's okay. They were unsure about it. If it wasn't nefarious, did something come back that would have indicated that? Like, was there any blood on it or anything that would have indicated that a skin cells wrapped around a specific area that would have indicated that it was used in a manner for strangulation of some sort? If they found something nefarious with it, okay, then them being accurate about it becomes a little bit more suspicious. But outside of it being wrapped up in a tree, which from what I have read there was a bit of a storm that was happening and that the wind was blowing a little bit. I'm not saying that that's the reason it got up there. I have no idea. I still haven't really seen a picture of it. If anybody has an image of it, please email it to me at drunkturkeyshow@gmail.com. I'd appreciate it. The kids were likely hurt outside. Okay. Outside where? Outside of the property, right there on the property itself, in the wooded area where they did do a search. I mean, again, it would be very difficult to find that, but if they did something nefarious outside in the woods, like what got them into the woods? It sounds like, according to Janie, that they didn't, they walked into the woods, but that Jack didn't really like going in there too much. He had to be carried around. I don't know. I mean, if something happened outside, where outside and when outside, and what did they do with the bodies? Where did they take them? Where did they hide them? They it seems like a lot of things were checked, right? But I do believe that something definitely did happen to them outside. Janie last heard them outside. So I think that whatever did happen to them was when they were outside. I don't think it happened inside of that house. Ellie hasn't even gotten everything back yet. How do we know what they have gotten back and what they haven't gotten back? Again, this is one of those things where I try to tell folks, just because you and I haven't heard it doesn't mean it hasn't gone through, it hasn't been investigated, hasn't been sought out, hasn't been figured out. I mean, there's a good possibility that they may have had something that we don't know. But they're pretty adamant that they're saying that there's no criminal investigation or things of that nature, which is another reason why I believe that those redacted stuff from the documents that we were talking about earlier was stuff that ended up being unfounded, because if it was founded to be, real or true, and it's accusations about somebody else, well, then this changes a little bit from a missing persons case to a criminal investigation, right? Which these guys have, at least at this point, denied having done. Doesn't mean that I don't know what their rules are on being truthful out there in Canada. If law enforcement can say there's no criminal investigation and there actually be one. I don't know how those laws work. I don't think that would fly here, because there's public records. You won't get much, you won't get much out of a active ongoing investigation, but you'll get a record saying that there is one, here in the United States. So, I mean, you only get the complaint for the most part, or the accusation on an ongoing investigation. You're not going to get much, but there's something there. Hey, how's it going, Janie? Good to see you. Good to see you. Could the animals have been an issue? I've heard of animals taking kids into the woods. Hey, Barbara, how's it going? Barbara Hall is another person that I'm helping. She's a mom of a child who lost his life, and myself and Steve from True Crime Web. He's a retired CSI crime scene investigator. We have been reporting on her son's death. It's been very mysterious. We suspect that that one of his friends may have had something to do with his death. We found some things, or Steve more than me has found some things. I've kind of just connected some dots there, and we're hoping to push that into law enforcement so that they can take another look into that case. This weekend, I'm going to drop some phone conversations from who we suspect may have had something to do with the crime. And these are prison phone conversations that he had that are pretty suspicious. So make sure you guys keep out for that. But good to see you, Barbara. Could the animals been an issue? They could have. I mean, if they did wander off into the woods or off into the road, and an animal approached them at some point, they could have spooked them into the woods, or the thought of an animal could have spooked them into the woods and they get lost. I would assume that if they succumb to something in the woods, that animals probably would have definitely moved some things around, at the very least. At the very least. And Drippy, it's not that I think that you have to be a criminal mastermind. I think you have to be a criminal mastermind to have done everything that Daniel and Malaya and Janie have done and still gotten away with it. There's a difference there. Huge difference between somebody getting away with a crime and somebody cooperating to the fullest, having the person that's supposed to have, your alibi, so to speak, because Daniel and Malaya are each other's alibi, so to speak. They've turned on each other. They've had everything completely turn on them. And yet they can't even come up with a possible criminal investigation here. Those dots do not connect. That's not 2 + 2 = 4. It doesn't connect there. You have all of these things that they have done, 12. Let me see if I can pull it back up real quick. Let's go to the top and we'll read it again. What it is that they did. They had a heavily, they showed an exhaustive investigation, which included polygraph tests of children, the children's immediate family, which they passed, checking bank information, electronic communication, search histories, and GPS coordinates off of cell phones, pumping an area of septic tanks and searching for contents, collecting video from private cameras within an 8-hour-kilometer radius, with businesses and school buses traveling in the area. I mean, they've done so much to turn in all this information and yet somehow still get away with it. I'm not connecting those dots where somebody is not a criminal mastermind, so to speak. She's not a criminal mastermind, or they're not criminal masterminds, and yet they still go through all this process, be as cooperative as can be, take lie detector tests. Multiple people took them, and they all pass. It's not the math ain't mathing for me. I'm sorry. It's not mathing. And I don't think that, like I said, I'm not saying that everybody has to be a criminal mastermind to get away with something, but you typically don't do certain things. If you plan on getting away with things, one is taking a lie detector test. Another one is being as cooperative, turning over your phones. I mean, there's just so many things there. It's not reading that way, in my opinion. I apologize. Let's see. You have to fill out a form for your employer to do a criminal background check. Yeah, but that's not the same as a criminal history report. Those are a lot different. I can tell you, as somebody that, again, Canada could be different, but what you get in a background check and a criminal history report from somebody and a background check from a law enforcement, and what you can get from an employer criminal background check. An employer criminal background check is just as much as like what you get on those the ads for people that are like that you hear that, oh, you want to check the background check of the person you're dating, or this, that, or a third, check out this website for $7.99 and you'll be able to do it. That's about the extensiveness that you'll get on a background check from an employer one, to be honest with you. A criminal history report from law enforcement is significantly different. And again, that's in the States. I could be wrong about Canada. DT, Daniel, and Janie, what do you think the chance? I think that there's a more likely of a chance that they got picked up by somebody else while randomly wandering this, like if they wandered off, than if there's somebody else involved, if somebody else had something to do with their disappearance outside of them wandering off. I think that them wandering off and being picked up at the side of the road by random is probably the most logical explanation of what occurred here. I get the statistics, and I know, there's some things there with the parents, but I just can't get past what law enforcement has put them through, the invasive, investigation that they've gone through, and not find a single thing to warrant a possible criminal investigation. Just an investigation, not anything. Just not to warrant an investigation at all. That tells me that they didn't really find much. Okay. Let's see. Wandered off. Where are they? That's a good question. I don't know. There's a lot of people that have wandered off. And during the Gabby Petito case, when they were out looking for her, they found remains from like 3 or 4 people that have been missing for a while. And so, the wilderness is crazy. It's not like you're going to walk back out there and, you can see for miles and miles. There's a lot of foliage in the way, a lot of trees, a lot of wilderness out there. It was one of the things that I noticed while the searches were out there. So I've never I've never discounted the possibility that they're still out there in the woods, probably just like unfounded yet in the woods. I think that's probably the most logical, followed by if somebody else had something to do with it, that based on the evidence that they've collected against or tried to collect against Daniel, Janie, and Malaya, I would lean more towards that somebody else may have done something while they wandered off. But I don't see this being a case where somebody purposefully went into their house to take the kids. I don't see that there. I don't think that's what happened here. I think that most likely they wandered off, and if somebody did something to them, it was after they wandered off and they were picked up while they were wandering off. They just ran into the wrong person at the wrong time. Because it's a house close by and criminal background, I don't think you can do a criminal background just because somebody lives close to a place where something happened. You have to have more reason than that. You don't have to have, you just got to have some suspicion. It's not like you need enough, like a warrant. It's not like a warrant. It's a lot less than a warrant to get a criminal history report on somebody. So it's not like it'd be difficult for law enforcement. They would just code it as under investigation and they can probably pull it. But even if you have somebody that has a criminal record, that's not enough to invade their privacy or their rights, right? Now, I don't know the rules and the laws out there. I know here in the States, if they were on parole or probation, it'd be a lot easier to just go in there and search the property without permission, so to speak, without a warrant too, just because they're on some sort of parole. But I don't know how Canada works with those things. Yeah, but I mean, Drippy says the son who went missing was driven away in a car, so a lot harder to find than two kids on foot. So it should be easier to find those kids, not harder. But you're also looking at the wooded aspect of it, right? And then the possibility of animal involvement. You know, if an animal can drag a small child, if it's like a wolf or a bear or something like that, pretty long ways, pretty long ways. And so, I mean, there's a lot of things that we don't know, right? You know, if a bear got a hold of them or multiple bears, if they ran into a cub, like a bear cub out there, mama's not going to care that they're children, you know, and mama can take those kids far away, a lot further than they can search. And a bear can move through the woods a lot faster and quicker than most people can. Guarantee you that. And so, I mean, there's a lot of aspects about it behind this case that we're not really looking into. I mean, we're just kind of like, all right, they walked away from this short area. They should be right there. I mean, there's a lot of things that could have happened. They you know, I'm not sure about the, it sounds like they're in a valley. I don't know if you go into the woods, if, you know, there's any, you know, up and downs or anything like that could have played a role in it too. Any rivers, any water, you know, those type of things. And so, I mean, there's more to it than just, all right, well, we can't see what's right in front of us, so it must not be here at all. I don't think so. I mean, I think there's a good possibility that they could still be in the woods. Yeah, because I do think that if, you know, there would have been some sort of animal involvement at some point, whether it was early or if they succumb to the wilderness, you know, at some point animals would go in there and scavenge. Now I do believe you would find something there, you know, a shoe, a shirt or something, right? You know, I know that's going to be the next question. Whereas some of this, it's pretty dense in there, you know? So I don't know, but it would be a lot harder to find a small piece of clothing in the middle of a dense forest than obviously a child. So, it's unfortunate, but I mean, I can't answer all the questions. I don't know all of the answers, you know, but I think that animal involvement could play a role into why they can't find anything relatively close. let's see. At Keynes, them wandering off and not being found by 160 plus trained search and rescue teams and infrared drones within a half hour. Kids stop every 5 seconds to pick up and look at stuff. Well, that's if they didn't get taken by something, like a bear, like I mentioned. I mean, it could have easily been they ran into a bear cub or some sort of wolf pack, or it could have been a lot of things that they ran into. I mean, I'm not familiar with what are the animals that are, to the area, but these are small kids, man. These aren't like grown adults that can't be dragged from a location very easily, right? And then, how many searches happen where people aren't found? I mean, I've talked about Brian Laundrie. There's Vanessa Guillen, who, this one was crazy. So she got her life taken by a fellow soldier out in Fort Hood. And this guy went out, put her in a dumpster, cut her body up, put her in a dumpster, in a little trash can, burned it up, dug her in a hole, dug her out, put her in another hole, put concrete, and then burned her again. And they had his phone pings because he had his phone on the entire time. And so they went out to those areas with search crew. And this area was out in the desert. So it wasn't, this is Killeen, Texas. This is more deserty than anything else. It's not foresty whatsoever. And for several days, they couldn't find anything. They found a burn spot. They found the spot on the ground where it was burned, but they couldn't find her body. In fact, it was a couple of workers working on the side of the road I think it was maybe 2-3 months later, end up finding her. Mainly because animals had infiltrated what he had done, but they had the location, they had a whole 9 yards, they found the burn area, and they still couldn't find the bodies. This is a very dense area. I would not be surprised if they're still in there. Jack and Lily could not have gone too far into those woods in a short period of time. I mean, we were really are discontinuing the fact or discrediting the possibility of how far they could have gone. There are children that are younger than them that have gone into the woods and have been found. Their bodies have been found. Or I think there was one scenario where a little boy, I think he was like 3 or 4 years old, traveled miles through swampy area too. And when they found him, he was did not appear that he walked that far. Now, this is part of the 411, and this is David Pilatus. He's a law enforcement officer who investigates missing persons in national forest. So all he does is investigate national forest disappearances. And so I've looked into a lot of these, and you'd be surprised how far somebody can go when they get lost and they're just walking aimlessly. You'd be surprised how far an animal can take a person, especially if they're a small child. And so, I mean, there's a lot of things that we're not considering when it comes into this. The police did say no criminal activity. They said no criminal. Yeah, they said it twice, I believe. Hey, Janie, I'm sorry that people ask you so many questions about things. I mean, there's only so much you can say and so much you can do over and over again, right? And I'm sorry that they're being attacked like that. These shouldn't be. It appears that you and your son and even Malaya, even though you guys suspect Malaya as well, there's a lot that you guys have gone through, an invasive investigation, and yet, and it seems like they've all but cleared you guys, and I don't understand why people are so dead strong on some of the things that, in my opinion, have been cleared. But it's crazy. But again, I get why people are suspicious. I just don't understand why they get so crazy. Jack didn't like the woods. I mean, it sounded like he did go walking in the woods. He liked to play with bugs. He picked up rocks and played with bugs. It sounded like he liked to be outside. Some kids don't like the woods until they do. Some kids don't leave their house until they do. Um, some things don't happen until they happen, right? So but all righty, guys. I think I might be calling this one a show. Let me see if I got anything missing. All right, Sunshine Susie comes in. Reason people think everything is some big conspiracy. They're either in the woods or someone picked them up. That's where things are pointing. That's what I say. That's exactly what I'm saying. I think they're either in the woods or somebody picked them up, because that's exactly where everything is pointing at. You know, if there was something that the parents did, I just can't see them being able to defy all the obstacles that they had in front of them with the investigation, plus pass a polygraph test, give all their information up, and cooperate to the extent that they have. And law enforcement cannot conclude into a simple criminal investigation, not even a thought of a criminal investigation. It's just where it points to me as well. Thank you so much for that. And Lori, thank you so much for being the newest member. Appreciate you. Appreciate all you guys. You guys rock. You guys will make the show go on. Our members, our subscribers, and everybody else in between. Listen, my son was in the ICU. I was in shock because I showed no emotion. They called CPS on me thinking I was doing harm to my child, who I delivered myself. I love my child. Everyone is different. That's true. You know, there was a situation. There's a movie actually out on one situation where this lady ended up. It was a break-in, and lady ends up. It was a couple. The boyfriend gets tied up, beaten, and the female gets abducted. They end up finding her, or they end up releasing her. The people that abducted her, and law enforcement is actually going at them for a very long time, thinking that they had something to do with their own case, and come to find out that she was abducted. She was beaten, and a lot of things were taken from her from force, and because of the way she acted. And then a lot of people looked at, for instance, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk in the Idaho case, and look at their actions about not calling 911 right away, or whatever the case may be, and look at that as a possibility or a plausibility that they may have, done something. And it's not the case. We end up having another person call and say that they had an abduction, or not an abduction, but an assault happened in her house. Somebody broke in. She ran into the closet, and these people that were breaking in were searching the house, not necessarily for her, but they were just ransacking the house. She had her phone in her hand, and she didn't call 911. They ended up finding her and assaulting her physically and sexually. And she called 911 afterwards, and law enforcement couldn't understand why she didn't call cops while she was in the closet with her phone on. Apparently, they beat crap out of her boyfriend too, who was there, and so there was a big old investigation into that apparently. But they ended up finding the people that committed the crime, and having to apologize to them as well. So everybody acts differently, in certain situations. To me, when I saw Malaya talking, her responses on her interview, to me, came off as somebody who was talking to law enforcement for a while and had been going back and forth, kind of brainstorming on what could have happened. Because she's like, and we went this way and we didn't hear that, and we wouldn't have, they could have gone out that way because we don't hear that, and this and that. All this was like, all right, she's talking to somebody. She's talked to someone multiple times. And that's someone I felt was law enforcement, and come to find out she spoke with them 5 different times in a very short period of time. And so I had been saying that before we found that out of the documents. Chalk it up to Psychic Daniel if you want to. But I said, based on what I had seen out of her interviews, that I felt like she had been talking to law enforcement multiple times, and that's what was being portrayed to me. Is that and somebody who's trying to get the information out there, and the right information. And I think there's a possibility that maybe she thinks that the kids are out in the woods, and if they're gone for that long, then it's probably not a good outcome, All right, I'm just going to scroll real fast here. Put a couple of stars if you have any final questions. All three are positive. The kids went out the back door. Yeah. When is Justin's polygraph? Why does Justin need to take a polygraph though? Like if I mean it's weird, right? Like I mean, if Justin has to take a polygraph test, like I would understand if Justin took a polygraph test. And I just recently found out who Justin is. I guess that's Daniel's brother. If Daniel failed his polygraph test, then yeah, for sure. But like, why does he need to take one if Daniel passed his? You know, you thinking that he was the one that secretly went in there, Daniel doesn't know about it and did something with the kids? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't jive together. But I recommend going back and checking it out if you're just tuning in. I'd appreciate it if you go back and listen. We're going to be calling it a show. I've been out here for a little bit longer than I expected. Have I listened to the secret recording at Cindy's? Yeah, I have. And this is another thing too, right? So they believe all these things about Daniel and that he committed this crime and that he was on drugs and he was abusive. And they're telling law enforcement this. And law enforcement's probably taking that with a big grain of, I mean, they're taking that with a lot of, not a grain of salt, but like a lot of plausibility into it, right? Because the kids are missing. They were under his care and they didn't go to school for 2 days. And there's some things there, right? And yet, so they get this information about all this stuff. So they go and get his bank records. They go and get his phone to see if they can find these transactions of drugs and all this other stuff. And they can't make that connection because there's no criminal investigation. Because if they could have made any of those connections, that he was abusive, that he did this, that he was on drugs, that he was on that, he was on this, there's the start of your criminal investigation into something. But yet nothing that they have told him has panned out, mainly because he's probably cooperated so much. Right. So that's kind of where I'm at on that. You know, I strongly suspect that Malaya's family believed that Daniel had something to do with it. Daniel believes that Malaya and her family had something to do with it. You have these two people that you would expect law enforcement to be your suspect, 1 and 2, turn on each other. That is a police officer's dream. That's an investigator's dream. That's what you want. That is the goal of your investigation. That is the goal of what you're trying to do. You're trying to turn your suspects against each other. Typically, it takes some work. You have to go and tell one, hey, guess what Daniel said? Daniel said that you did it. And then you go to Daniel, hey, guess what Malaya said? Malaya said you did something. And that's what you do to try to get them to turn on each other. But they've done it on their own. They've done it on their own. And then in efforts to prove that they themselves were correct or true or right, they've taken polygraph tests and in the end, they passed them. They passed them. All righty, guys. Well, I think that's going to do it. I don't see any more questions starred. Going through it kind of quick, though. I told the RCMP investigators that they are welcome on this property anytime to do whatever they need to do. I do not have anything to hide. I have been cooperating in anything they need to know. I agree. I mean, I strongly suspect that what they're saying is true. That they've gone in and looked at everything and based on the warrants, based on all the stuff that they've said, they've investigated them. Exactly, DT. Not a witch hunt. It's an investigation. If facts and evidence. Yeah, exactly. Facts and evidence. That's what we look for here, guys. I look at facts and evidence. You are not blocked. Yeah. So what I believe happened is Malaya probably took the 2 clothes from Daniel and at the request of law enforcement, because that's what he was wearing that day, and turned it into law enforcement so they can test them. 100%. I believe that's what I would have done. You know, if I was investigating this case, I would have told Malaya, like, hey, do me a favor and give me some clothes from Daniel, the ones that he was wearing. We want to rule him out as a suspect. I would have 100% done. This would have been, the first thing to do. Take their clothes, take the pictures of their hands, of their face, neck, fingernails, clothing, all 9 yards. I'm not sure. It wasn't I. I haven't blocked anybody or anything. But if my mods did it, I have full faith in my mods. My mods are amazing. Oh no, I went too far down. What about the black eye Lily got on Wednesday before the kids went missing? Jack had a black eye. Why so many black eyes? Yeah, that's suspicious. I'm not gonna lie. That was one of the things that I looked at and was like, hey, this is kind of weird. You know, is this the real reason why they didn't go to school that day? You know, that crossed my mind 100%. You know, it's just that law enforcement with that information couldn't come up with anything else like with a crime or in a criminal investigation. Like I said, I understand why people are suspicious. This is one of the reasons why I believe people are suspicious of Daniel. And I don't discredit people that are suspicious because of this fact. But I do think that it's also possible that two things can be right at the same time. I think there's a possibility. I mean, kids are kids. You know, if they're active kids and jumped around and did things, there's, you know, possibility that they hurt themselves. Now, I mean, I myself haven't seen the black eye itself. So I don't know how bad or how large or how big or small, or if his eye was swollen or her eye was swollen shut. You know, those type of things that come in, that are indicative of a black eye. If it's just the black eye, given their age, the size of Daniel and the strength and his, you know, the size of his hand compared to their face, you would expect that if he was to strike them with the strength to give him a black eye, it'd probably cause some swelling too. You know, if it's just the black eye, it's probably a smaller infraction. That was strong enough to obviously cause a contusion, but maybe perhaps not like a full force strike or backhand or any of those type of things. And I got to see where it's at, how it looks. I haven't seen those things to determine. Is it plausible that I think he said that one of them dropped a toy on herself and that the other one, the other child gave it to him? I gave my brother a couple black eyes growing up when we were little. He gave me a black eye once growing up when we were little. You know, I gave my brother a nasty black eye one time. I was playing football and the ball went right through his hands and hit him right in the eye. And so, not saying that's the case with the kids, but if you have active little kids, bumps and bruises happen. Now, black eyes are suspicious. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna deny that. That's something that is odd. But like I said, I don't fault people for being suspicious, especially early on. It's kind of like in the Delphi case. I would not fault anybody for thinking Ron Logan had something to do with that case. I would have been there with you day one. I too would have been there with you saying Ron Logan did something. You know, day one in this case, I may have been with you. Daniel and Malaya have done something. I would not be with you today on either one of those cases, even if I started those cases then, because I follow the evidence and where it leads me. And I follow what law enforcement do, because to me, that's the strongest point of what actually is going on in the case, right? And so, like, even if I followed the Richard Allen case day one and thought Ron Logan had something to do with it, I probably would have been very skeptical with the bridge guy video, because everything in that video is an indication of a shorter guy. You know, the pants are folded up at the bottom, and they're also cuffed up all the way up his leg, indication of a shorter person. Ron Logan's over 6 foot. He'd have high water pants, not the opposite problem. You know, the sleeves also are real shriveled up on the arms, an indication of a shorter person. I mean, this was in the rural area of Indiana, so it's not like, you know, a short person's going out there getting tailor-made Cartmans, you know, and tailor-made jeans from Walmart. Those things don't exist there. And so you see a large shirt coming out of underneath the sweater, another indication of a shorter man, and small shoes. So, you know, I would not have been on the Ron Logan as the bridge guy train very long. You know, just watching that, I would have been, this guy's probably 5'5", 5'6" at the tallest. You know, and when Richard Allen got arrested and his confession came through, I would have definitely followed those leads and that evidence that direction. Same thing here. I would have been, yeah, Daniel looks kind of suspicious. Janie and Malaya look suspicious. But as the polygraph tests come out, as we start to see that they've done all these things when it comes to phones, bank cards, records, everything, I would not have stayed on that train very long. Thank you for looking at this with an open mind. I appreciate that, Lori. Thank you so much. And welcome to the DT show. Daniel, thank you so much for covering. This is an important case. I appreciate that. Thank you, guys. I get a lot of thank yous. I know I get some folks that come in with a little bit of pushback, and I get why. But for the most part, I get a lot of thank yous, and I've gotten a lot of people from the area also thankful for me covering the case, and I'm going to continue to cover it. Let's see, Stevie, what are the chances the kids are being found? Honestly, alive? Slim. I'll be honest, it's slim. I don't think so. And found in general, maybe in the wintertime, if the foliage kind of starts to, as it gets colder, the leaves come off, the bushes go bare. Maybe they'll find something, that's before it snows heavily. I would hope, they'll find something that is so it points in one direction or another. But I don't know. They looked that way prior to Malaya moving in with Daniel. After they moved in together, their appearance changed. Oh, I didn't catch that. But all righty, guys. Well, that's going to do it for me today. Daniel, you said you'd tell us your theory. I did. I'm sorry if I didn't go into it too deep. One last time. There's a guy that lives in the area that did not allow law enforcement to check his property. This guy has a criminal record, apparently. I haven't verified all these things, but I have spoken to multiple people about this. And this is the reason why I haven't given his name or his address or his location. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to put under somebody such a scrutiny that I don't know for sure. But from the information I know is that the guy has a criminal past for theft. He didn't allow law enforcement to search his area, his property, was upset that law enforcement was near his property, and has been seen in the area driving around in the late morning hours. Is the same person that gave the indication that there was a vehicle that was driving around in the early morning hours. That was a 5-speed vehicle. In my opinion, that was a little bit of deflection from what he may have been doing. It may not have anything to do with the disappearance of Lilly Sullivan. He may have been out there trolling for thefts, and he doesn't want people to look at him, so he's saying it's a car when it was his truck. So it could be some deflection there. He claimed that he didn't know, and I'm not 100% certain that it was him, but from what I've been able to gather, that it was him. That claimed that didn't know that there was kids at Daniel's house, even though his kids ride the same bus. And apparently he's been on the property there before. I mean, it's been alleged that he may have broken into the property at one point. So you have a guy that lives in the area, and why this is important that he lives in the area is because unlike Daniel and Malaya that handed over their phones, they're not going to get the phones of everybody in the area. So you're reliant on phone pings and phone connections to phone towers. And in a rural area, which cell service sounds spotty, you're going to have a wide open area of where the phone could be in a phone ping area. So you could literally be either at Daniel's house or a mile away, and there's a good chance that you couldn't distinguish the two pings of where they were, just that they were somewhere in that area. And so, if law enforcement is pulling a geofencing or they're pulling warrants on cell phone towers, they've already looked at cameras around the area and leading into that area, and I don't think they found anything that seemed odd or suspicious. So it kind of focuses in on somebody from the area, somebody that even if they had their phone on them, based on the lack of cell service there, it would be indistinguishable whether or not they were at their house, Daniel's house, down the road, or whatever the case. So they can hide within that cell frame, that cell phone circle, or possibilities of where they could have been located. They have to be within the area of where they were able to have gotten footage from cameras of the area, which this person also falls into line. This person possibly has a criminal record. From what I understand is him and his brother were forced out of a different town for major thefts. Now, in my opinion, when you have a theft problem like that and you're stealing in that manner, in my experience in law enforcement, a lot of the people that were stealing like that was because they were paying for a habit that usually influences their mind in some form or fashion, and potentially could have made somebody do something pretty horrific. Now, there's the blanket aspect, right? And we found out that the garbage was out by the roadway, at the end of the driveway is what it said. If they had some things, which I found out here recently, not from Janie, not from Daniel, from somebody else, of the driveway of what it looked like that morning and the amount of stuff. There was a washer. There was some other things that were out there. A burglar might be tempted to go onto that property to look at those things. A burglar might be tempted to look into the trash to see if there's anything that was thrown away that they might be able to scavenge and, do whatever they can with. And so I wonder if maybe that's where the blanket comes from, a thief going through the trash, so to speak, and sees a blanket, sees some kids, says, hey, come here real quick. I got your blanket. Aren't you supposed to be in school? Something like that. I'll take you to school. Don't worry about it. You don't want to get your parents in trouble for not going to school. You can get in trouble for not going to school, right? Something to that effect. And yeah. They get in the car and something nefarious happens afterwards. I think it's quite possible. I would suspect that if somebody picked up the kids based on the camera footage, it would have to be somebody that lived close. Based on the cell phone records that they pulled or the cell towers, it'd have to be somebody that lived close. You're probably looking for somebody that has some sort of criminal record. You're probably looking for somebody that is not cooperating with law enforcement, such as not allowing them to search their property. And so I'm not saying it's this guy, but I think law enforcement should talk to him more. All righty. Oh, sorry, Sandy. Thank you for telling me. It's pronounced Cobb. The Cobaquid. All right. Well, I had no idea. I appreciate that. Well, guys, that's definitely going to do it for me now. We're almost at 3 hours. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. Please like, comment, subscribe. If you guys would do me a favor and share this content to the Facebook groups and stuff like that are covering this case, that way we can get this information out to as many people as possible. In the end, I think that, we're here to cover the truth. And I think in the end, we'll probably do something very close to that, and get the truth out there, the whole truth. I know obviously there's only so much we can do. And that's the reason why I say it in that manner, is because there's only so much information that is out there that we can deduce and able to work through. But we're going to continue to fight the good fight, so to speak, and continue to search. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, ring that notification bell. I'll be back on sometime this weekend. You don't want to miss it. So until next time, guys, we'll see you later. Peace out.